Chapter 281. GOR Chapter 267. Incorporating the Wildfire Plains. Green's worries were not without reason. Outside the city, Morka's decision was a wise one. He only had 5,000 men. After killing off their mounts, the small number of mounted soldiers he had were now mostly infantry. If they were to simply surround the city, it would not be an issue. If they were lucky, taking down Denzel City would not be an impossibility. However, reinforcements had arrived. Additionally, it was 2,000 mounted soldiers. The difference in strength between the two sides had drastically changed. With his 5,000-plus infantry soldiers, the chances of victory against 2,000 elite mounted soldiers in a field battle were simply too low. Additionally, if they did not retreat, they might end up getting entangled by the enemy. In the field battle, it was not impossible for them to be devoured by the enemy. Since that was the case, Morka decided to give up on Denzel City and led his men away. This decision was quite the wise one. Nene's mounted soldiers slowly chased after Odin for a while outside the city. As Morka was retreating very carefully, Nene was unable to find an opportunity to give chase. She simply kept her men far behind, maintaining a safe distance between the two sides. Then, she watched as Odin's men headed south. At that moment, the city walls had transformed into a sea of joy. The morale of the soldiers defending the city was not high to begin with. The only reason they had chosen to defend the city was because they wanted to protect their home and loved ones. However, they also knew that if a fight were to break out, they would have no chance of winning. Thus, they could only defend the city day by day. Unexpectedly, a miracle would happen. Odin's men had left. How could they not be overjoyed? Green had already ordered his men to quickly move away the rocks blocking the city gates to allow the reinforcements to enter the city. Shea observed the cheering around him and sighed inwardly. Then, he suddenly turned around and saw that Via's expression was somewhat unnatural. Via had also clearly seen the mounted soldiers outside the city. He also saw Nene among the mounted soldiers. Nene had a strangely large stature. She stood out among the crowd. When Via saw her, his expression turned somewhat odd. Then, without waiting for Shea to say anything, she left the city. Nai was not in a hurry to enter the city. Instead, she led her men to run around the wilderness outside the city. After making sure that Odin and his men were far away, she slowly made her way to the city walls. Meanwhile, in the city, Via had asked Shea to prepare 2 horses for her. "You're leaving? Aren't you in too much of a hurry?" Shea was a little confused. Via, however, did not want to meet Nene again. He had already mounted his horse. He shook his head and said, "I have urgent matters to attend to. I cannot delay." She sat on her horse and glanced at Shea for a moment before whispering, "This city cannot be defended. Now that Odin's men are heading south, Moore County has become the enemy's territory. Manninger is also a famous general of Odin. Before he invades the south, he will definitely not allow a Byzantine army like you to stand behind him. So once he is free, he will definitely pull out the nail that is you first. My suggestion is still the same. If you want to live, you should abandon the city and take a detour south to escape." When Shea heard this, his expression turned solemn. But after thinking carefully, he laughed out loud and said, "The kindness of others must be repaid. The old emperor has treated me well. If I run away when things come to a head, I, Shea Lei Ming, will not do such a despicable thing. I appreciate your good intentions." Pedantic. Via sat on his horse and stared coldly at Shea. He slowly shook his head and said, "You are courting death. Don't blame others." As he spoke, although not all of the soil and stones under the city gates had been removed, a gap had been cleared. Via immediately urged his horse forward. Under Shea's signal, the guards opened up a path for Via to pass. Via rushed out of the city gates, but suddenly stopped his horse with a shout. He then turned his horse around and ran back to Shea. He looked down at Shea with a complicated expression. Finally, he sighed and said, "Forget it. I know that if I do not save you, the people who entrusted me with saving you will be very disappointed. I have an idea. After you hear it, you can decide on your own." Pausing, she bent down and lowered her voice. "The only organized army in the north of the Empire is the 7th Division. The 7th Division is stationed in the neighboring county of Moore County, not too far from here. They are in a more difficult situation than you are now. There are rebel troops on both sides, and Manning's Scarlet Snow Army is heading south. They want to go south to Osgilla, but the road is occupied by rebel troops. It is impossible for an infantry division to go through thousands of miles of enemy territory to reach Osgilla. So they must be in a dilemma now. If at this time you want me to attack the 7th Division?" Shea's eyes suddenly lit up. Vaya laughed coldly. Among the standing divisions in the central Byzantium, the 7th Division's strength is at the bottom. But after all, it is still the central standing army. Their equipment and the quality of their soldiers are much better than the motley crew under your command. If you want to defend your land, how can you do it without soldiers? Coincidentally, they need a foothold. If you can move this division over. The commander of the 7th Division was appointed before the last war. He has been in office for less than half a year. He does not have enough prestige and his foundation is not stable. I heard that he is also a good-for-nothing. If you can control this army, you will at least have a foothold in the north to protect yourself. Shea's eyes lit up when he heard that. Wu Ran stared at Vaya. You are hinting at me to seize military power? I am just a small county governor." Vaya laughed coldly. "Of course you can't do it alone, but that Grim beside you. Don't you know that he used to serve in the 7th Division? Now there are 5 emblem groups in the 7th Division. 3 of the flag bearers were his colleagues and subordinates back then. With him to help you, if you—" After saying that, a murderous look flashed across Via's eyes. Then, she shut her mouth. Shea's heart thumped wildly when he heard that. Vaya paused for a moment before slowly opening her mouth. Her voice was cold and deep as she said, "Chaos is upon us. The northern part of the Empire is no longer under the control of the Empire. This lone army will either be devoured by the rebel army or by Odin's men. Or you devour them. There is no fourth possibility. Rather than being annihilated by the rebel army or Odin's men, why not? You decide for yourself." Vaya had said all she wanted to say. Without saying anything else, she whipped her horse and let out a shout before galloping away. After leaving Denzel City, Vaya immediately headed southeast. From afar, she watched as the group of people inside turned around and headed back to the city. Vaya paused for a moment and looked at the walls of Denzel City. She sneered inwardly. Teacher said that he is a promising man. Now it seems, he still lacks the decisiveness to kill. How can he be so wishy-washy? How can he accomplish anything? Teacher must have misjudged him. Sigh, teacher, is teacher dead or not? Denzel City was already overcrowded. It was originally just a small border city with a population of only a few tens of thousands. However, in addition to the original population of the city, the scorched earth policy a few days ago had forced many people from the surrounding areas to move into the city. Thus, the population had nearly doubled. After the 2,000 mounted soldiers had entered the city, they saw that the streets were crowded. The original square in the city was now filled with tents and had become a temporary residence for the people. Fortunately, Denzel City was built with a certain military purpose in mind. There was also a sizable military camp in the city, enough to house several thousand soldiers. After the 2,000 mounted soldiers were settled in the military camp, she immediately brought several of her subordinates to see Shea. Shea was already extremely busy, but the main reason was that he was deliberately hiding and didn't dare to go inside. Nevertheless, she had come from afar to rescue him. No matter how much he tried to hide, it was impossible for him to not meet her. Fortunately, after meeting him in the garrison hall, Nene did not say anything that would make Shea feel awkward. His expression was normal. After a shallow salute, he said in a businesslike tone, "Sir Garrison Guard, my men have received a lot of kindness from the Byzantine Empire. This time, when I heard that Odin is besieging the city, I came to help. I do not ask for any reward. I only ask that Sir Garrison Guard give them a way out on account of the fact that many of my men are citizens of the Byzantine Empire." After hearing these words, Shea faintly understood. He looked at Green, who was also in the hall, and smiled. Although he did not recognize Nene, when Nene had just entered the city, Sharba had secretly told him about the absurd story between this brother valiant warrior and Shea. When Green heard it, he almost vomited blood from laughing. However, after Nene's men entered the city, Green observed the cavalry closely. The more he looked, the more excited he became. The 2,000 mounted soldiers under Nene's command were just a group of mounted bandits. However, in Green's opinion, the majority of them were excellent horsemanship. They were strong and sturdy. There was no need to talk about their quality. Moreover, their formation was very strict. They were not as loose and chaotic as ordinary mounted bandits. Even in the eyes of a famous imperial general like Green, this was a group of relatively good elite cavalry. Although the members were a little mixed, looking at these 2,000 men, the older ones had white beards and the younger ones had tender faces. There were even some women. However, if carefully selected, it would not be a problem to pick out 1,000 elite. He was shocked. Such an elite group was just a group of mounted bandits? At this moment, Nene's tone clearly hinted that she wanted to be incorporated into the army. How could Green refuse such a good thing? He immediately smiled and said, "Your Excellency has the heart to serve the country. Of course, it is good. However, there are rules in the army. As for the incorporation, we can slowly discuss it." After that, Green still wanted to say something. Shea was already a little depressed. He directly stared at Nene and said, What do you want to do?" Nene laughed in her heart. She remembered that day in Wildfire Town, when she had a deep talk with Aunt Sophia. Before she left, that mysterious expert had given her several suggestions. But at this moment, her face remained calm. She said indifferently, "My lord, I don't have any intentions. To tell you the truth, although I am used to being free, the situation now is different from the past. I have to find a way to survive for my brothers and sisters." After hearing this, Shea only frowned. He carefully looked at Nene from top to bottom. A few days ago, this woman was so desperate to marry him. But today, seeing her so calm and restrained, Shea muttered in his heart. Nene then turned her eyes to Green and said seriously, "Odin's people went south on a large scale. At this moment, they have already entered the Byzantium. I will say something disrespectful. After this war in Byzantium, regardless of victory or defeat, the land in the north will no longer belong to the empire." Although these words were somewhat ear-piercing to the loyal Green, he wasn't a pedantic person. He also understood that according to the current situation, what Nene said was true. He also nodded. "I don't know if the two of you have thought about it. If Odin's people occupy the land in the north of Byzantium for a long time, then there will be a direct consequence." Nene exhaled. Her tone was somewhat helpless. Shea and Green's eyes lit up. They looked at each other and said, "You mean the Wildfire Plain?" "That's right. The Wildfire Plain was originally an ungoverned place. That's why it is in the Thieves' Forest. There are no less than a few dozen mounted bandits and black tribes occupying the Wildfire Plain. Originally, the two great empires didn't care about this place. We naturally lived comfortably on the Wildfire Plain. But once Odin's people occupied the northern part of the Byzantine Empire, then the situation immediately changed. In the future, the Wildfire Plain became the backyard of the Odin's people. Their army is stationed at the front. How can they allow so many uncontrolled armed forces to appear on the wildfire plain behind them? Therefore, after thinking about it carefully, everyone's days of freedom on the wildfire plain will come to an end. What she said was rather reasonable. The Odin's people had already moved south. A few of their corps took advantage of the fact that the northern part of the Byzantine Empire was undefended to drive in. Once they occupied the land, how could they easily withdraw? In this way, the wildfire plain naturally became a territory that the Odin had to control. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to maintain effective control over the Byzantium lands they had conquered. Shea asked himself, if he were the commander of the Odin's army, the first thing he would do once he was free was to pull out all the threats behind him. His Denzel city was naturally a nail. But how could he leave those mounted bandits of various sizes on the wildfire plain behind? He would definitely send troops to clear them out. Even the garrison of Wildfire Town was indispensable. He had to pave a stable route for his rear. Only then would the army at the front be at ease. Green also thought of this and nodded lightly at Shea. Shea didn't say anything. Green smiled and said, "Since it's like this, Nene." "Your Excellency." Green didn't know whether to call her Miss or something else. After hesitating for a moment, he simply called her Your Excellency. "You must be tired from the long journey. Please rest in the garrison. I will discuss your arrangements with the garrison." After that, Nene didn't say anything else and directly saluted the two. She didn't even look at Shea and directly left. After Nene left, Green laughed and looked at Shea. His expression became extremely strange. He suddenly said in a low voice, "I say, you should marry her." "What?" Shea glared. "Damn it. It must be that guy Sharba who talked too much." Green laughed loudly. He looked outside the door and lowered his voice again. "Marrying a wife, and giving her over 1,000 elite soldiers. Such a good deal, why wouldn't you do it? A wife like this, the more the better. If you can marry 8 or 10 of them, we will have over 10,000 soldiers. Even if the Manninger army comes again, with 10,000 elite soldiers, we won't be afraid. Pay. If you want to marry her, then marry her." Shea flew into a rage out of humiliation and was about to run away. Green grabbed him and laughed. "Don't run. Sigh, the one she wants to marry is you. What does it have to do with me? Fine. Don't glare at me. I won't say anything else." He forced Shea to sit down and said in a low voice, "Weren't we worried about the lack of military strength? This Miss Nene reminded me that there are still a lot of forces on the wildfire steppe. In the current situation, anyone with a brain will have to find a way out. If we can incorporate them, even if it's just a part of them, it will be greatly beneficial." Shea was also excited. The mercenary corps, warrior corps, bandit corps, as well as the large and small black tribes on the wildfire plain were all targets that could be incorporated. These organizations had many members and some had few members. Although their quality was uneven, there would always be some elites among them. For example, Hoka and Russell, who had followed him. These guys were mercenaries in the past, so there was naturally no need to talk about their individual quality. They only needed to be properly honed and integrated, and then they would become an elite force. "That's a good idea." Shea opened his mouth. But when he mentioned incorporation, he suddenly remembered what Vaya had said to him before he left. The 7th Corps, thinking about it this way, that Vaya had actually said such words to him, publicly hinting that he should incorporate the Empire's army. It seemed that this Vaya didn't have any loyalty to the Empire. But Vaya had reminded him that if he wanted to do this, he would need Green's help. Green was absolutely loyal to the Empire. Would he be willing to help him? "I have an idea." Green chuckled. "The matter on the wildfire steppes cannot be delayed. While Manning is still busy, we have to act as soon as possible. Among your subordinates, Hawk and Russell were originally mercenaries who died on the wildfire steppes to make a living. Forget about Hawk. He's young and impetuous. I'm afraid he won't be able to do it. That Russell is old and slick. He's been on the wildfire steps for many years. He's familiar with the people there. Those large and small tribal groups all have some friendship with him. Why don't we send him as a contact person? There's also Nene. Let Russell and Nene go to the wildfire steps immediately. If we can persuade a few tribal groups to join us, our strength will increase by a lot. Nene? Send Nene? What can she do there? Shea frowned. In his opinion, Nene did not have any connections on the wildfire step. Russell was a good candidate. Green sighed. He stared at Shea for a moment. He slowly walked over and closed the door. He turned around and stared at Shea. Do you really not understand, or are you playing dumb with me? Looking at Green's serious expression, Shea's heart suddenly moved. He immediately read the meaning in Green's eyes. It seems that Spain does not have the aura of a champion. Instead, Argentina showed its aura of a champion tonight. But it showed it too early. Also, I'm a little worried about old Ma's use of players. Although the smoking pipe played with a hat tonight, his ability to waste opportunities is stronger than his ability to score goals. He has already proven that he's not a shooter for big matches. He still loves Milito the most. Italy and France tend to be mediocre. As for England, a team without creativity and breakthrough ability in the midfield will not go far. As for Germany, they're getting younger, but their forward line is still not good. I'm now optimistic about the Netherlands and Brazil, because often in history, the more flamboyant these two teams play, the faster they die. This year, both teams have the strength, but they play very pragmatically. Oh, if Spain advances in second place in the group, they may meet Brazil in the second round. That's going to be fun, haha. To be continued. If you want to know what happens next, please go to www.chidien.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 282. GOR Chapter 268. Falling in love with a word. Green's expression was dignified as he stared at Shea. He lowered his voice and slowly said, "NNI has led the masses to join us. Of course, it is a good thing for us. Naturally, I also believed that there was no other intention in his heart. However, Shea, you have to understand that the most important and complicated part of the incorporation process is how to incorporate them. There were 2,000 cavalrymen under him. Although there were old, weak women and children, all of them could ride horses. All of them could wield swords. Furthermore, all of them had horses. This was 2,000 people. 2,000 people who were used to being horse thieves, used to being free and unrestrained, used to living a life of blood on the edge of the blade. But think about it, we only have less than 1,000 people. To put it bluntly, we only have 300 to 400 soldiers. Among them, only the mercenaries you brought back can be of use, or can barely compete with the horse gang in terms of quality. Apart from that, if Odin's people did not suddenly come to the south, I would like to replace all the other local garrison troops. Have you thought about this? If we can't properly reorganize these 2,000 people and subdue them, then, I'll say something unpleasant. Are we the ones who recruited them, or are they the ones who swallowed us? Grimm's words were spoken in a slow and dignified tone, and the content of his words could be said to be even more striking. Although he understood that Green's words were quite reasonable, Shea still felt somewhat uncomfortable when he heard them, and his expression naturally changed. Green looked at the change in Shea's expression and knew what this kid was thinking. He just laughed bitterly and said, "I understand. You must think that these thoughts of mine are not open and honest enough. Of course, I also believe that she wouldn't be disloyal. But even if she truly wanted to follow you, what about her subordinates? These 2,000 people are used to not being controlled. They are used to swarming up and dispersing in a hubbub. They are used to eating meat and drinking wine. If we suddenly take them in and control them according to the rules of the army, will they be convinced? At this point, Green snorted and said in a low voice, "What do you mean by elites? Unity, bravery, strict orders from top to bottom. Only such an army could fight against 10. Otherwise, it would be a motley crew with no clear orders, subjugating their superiors. Even if we have thousands of men and horses, it would be useless." Shea finally sighed. "I understand what you mean, but Nene is a smart person." Green smiled. "When we reorganize this group of mounted gangsters, we must send her away. Otherwise, with her at the side, those mounted gangsters will only obey her. I think I'll personally talk to her tomorrow. There's no need to point it out. I'll just say that I'm inviting her and Luo Su to make a trip to Wildfire Plains. She'll understand the meaning behind it." Shea was still silent, but Green had already walked over and patted him on the shoulder. He slowly said, "Actually, according to my original plan, this kind of incorporation is absolutely unacceptable." Why?" Green sneered. "These mounted bandits, mercenaries, and those big and small tribal groups on the Wildfire Plains. Although there is no lack of valiant warriors among them, these guys are all wild and hard to tame. They are unyielding. Even if you want to incorporate them, you can't do it this way. My original plan was to have more than a year's time to reorganize the army in Moore County and train them into an elite force. Then I'll bring them to Wildfire Plains to suppress bandits, one tribe after another, beat one into submission, then incorporate another. This kind of incorporation has always needed to be done with kindness and power. You only have kindness and no deterrence. Even if these guys come to join you, they won't really be convinced. Only by fiercely fighting a few battles and beating these guys into submission, they will revere you in their hearts. Only then will they really listen to your orders in the future. It's just that. Alas, the current situation doesn't allow it. We have to pull together the troops as soon as possible. Only then can we contend with Odin's people. Therefore, we can't care about these thoughts right now." The next day, Green went to find Nene as expected. It was unknown what he said to her, but after the two finished talking, Nene gladly accepted the order and didn't show any dissatisfaction. Moreover, in the afternoon, she followed Green and Shea to the barracks in the city and gathered the numerous mounted bandit leaders for a discussion. She straightforwardly stated that she was following orders to make a trip to Wildfire Plains. When these words came out, the mounted bandit leaders started to clamor one after another. "The leader is going to Wildfire Plains? Okay, let's make another trip there. Haha, should we go and steal a few votes from them? We just ran here and now we have to run back?" However, we naturally don't dare to go against the orders of the young Mississippi. After these people clamored for a while, Nene waved her hand and shouted loudly, "All of you shut up and be quiet. This time, you don't need to follow me to Wildfire Plains. I will only bring a few people. The rest of you will stay here and listen to the military orders of the military officer." When these words came out, the dispute below became even more intense. "What? The young miss is leaving us here? What kind of joke is this? We only listen to the young miss." "That's right, these Byzantium soldiers are all good-for-nothings. Why should we listen to them?" Seeing these people clamoring, Green only stood to the side with a calm expression. On the other hand, Shea secretly looked at Green and thought in his heart, it seems that Green's worries were indeed correct. Seeing the reactions of her subordinates, Nene felt that she had lost some face. She pulled out her sword and swung it down, immediately chopping off the corner of the table. She shouted sternly, "All of you shut up!" Her roar immediately covered the clamor of the audience. The sword in Nene's hand was suffused with a cold light. Her eyes swept over everyone and said sternly, "Since we have come to join the army, from now on, we are Byzantium soldiers. In the future, there will be no young miss here, nor will there be any leaders. There will only be officers and subordinates. If anyone has the wrong idea, stick out your neck and eat my knife." After a pause, Nene slowed down her speech and slowly said, "This time, before joining the army, I have already asked for your opinion. At that time, I said very clearly that if anyone is not willing, I will not stop you. We have accumulated some wealth over the years. Everyone will divide it and part on good terms. When we meet again in the future, we will still be brothers. But if you choose not to leave and come with me, you will have to change your mind and change your way of living. You are all men, so don't treat the words you say as farts. Today, I will say one more thing. If anyone regrets, I will give you another chance. Say it now and you can leave. I will not stop you, and I will also give you a sum of money. But if you don't leave now and dare to cause trouble in the future..." Her words were spoken resolutely and decisively. Immediately, all the leaders were convinced. After a while, someone said, all right. Back then, everyone followed the old man. Now, everyone follows the young Mississippi. In any case, we are all following the young miss. Since the young miss has made up her mind, from now on, we will change into military uniforms and eat military pay. Brothers, we have all made up our minds and will not change it. If anyone doesn't want to do it, don't say it now. If he causes trouble in the future, everyone will cut him down together. Very good. Seeing that no one spoke, Nene immediately gave an order and called out the names of a few mounted bandit leaders. These people were the most arrogant among the mounted bandit leaders. After she pointed out these few people, she ordered them to follow her to the Wildfire Plains. The rest of them would stay in Denzel City. After I leave, all of you will listen to General Shea's orders. Even if it was me, I would only obey General Shea's orders. No matter what General Shea asks you to do, you must listen obediently. You are not allowed to disobey in the slightest. Otherwise, I will not let you off. The military law will not let you off. One of the leaders who was called out by her to follow her to the Wildfire Plains couldn't help but ask, "Young miss, when we follow you to the Wildfire Plains, should we make arrangements for our subordinates first? Otherwise, after we leave, there will be no one to control them." Nene immediately glared at him and coldly said, "Control what? From now on, this place will be General Shea's soldiers. What do you need to control? Remember, you are no longer a bandit leader. What subordinates? There will be none. From now on, you will all be General Shea's subordinates." Her words were rather straightforward, and the leaders of the horse bandits immediately understood that eldest young miss had really made up her mind. In any case, everyone had already discussed and agreed to join the army. There wasn't much disagreement. At this moment, someone heard this and deliberately laughed. "There is no difference. In any case, General Shea will be our son-in-law from now on. Listening to the son-in-law is the same as listening to the young Mississippi. In any case, even our young miss will have to listen to the son-in-law from now on." Ha 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 ha. These words immediately made Nene's face turn red. She looked at Shea with a complicated expression. On the other hand, Shea's expression didn't change. He pretended as if nothing had happened. After leaving the barracks, Nene said to Shea and Green, "I took away a few brothers with the fiercest temperament. I took away these few troublesome people and left them to you. Even if someone wants to cause trouble, they won't be able to." Pausing for a moment, she smiled and said, "Among the leaders left behind, there is Uncle Hakan. He is my father's old subordinate. He is the most loyal and honest. His prestige is also sufficient. If anyone dares to cause trouble after I leave, you can ask Uncle Hakan to step in. He will definitely be able to suppress these guys." Green's expression was sincere. "Your Highness Nene, thank you very much." Pausing for a moment, Green muttered to himself and said, "As for the matter of incorporation, I am afraid we will have to break up your division. Moreover, our division is limited. There is only one emblem group. However, no matter how we organize, we will still need to invite you to assume the position of battalion commander. If you have any old subordinates, they can all be incorporated into the 1st Battalion. Nene immediately glared at him. Lord Green, do you still doubt me? Since I have sincerely come to join you, there is no need for any battalion commander. There is no need to leave me any old subordinates in the 1st Battalion. I also don't want to lead any soldiers in the future. She suddenly blushed and glanced at Shea. Green immediately understood and laughed. Ah, yes, I was wrong. In the future, with your status, you really don't have to lead soldiers anymore. Nene's expression was awkward. Although she had a straightforward temperament, she couldn't help but feel a little shy at this moment. She quickly found an excuse and ran away. After Nene left, Green looked at Shea and sized him up. Hey, Shea. Yes. Shea looked a little depressed. I say, you might as well marry her. Shea. At noon, after Nene had lunch, she led a few men and Russell out of the city in the direction of the wildfire plains. They had only left the city for a short while when they suddenly heard the sound of horse hooves behind them. Nene turned back to look and saw a horse galloping from the direction of Denzel City. Looking at the figure, it was Shea. Everyone stopped their horses and waited for Shea to come before them. Seeing Shea on horseback with an awkward expression, Russell immediately laughed. Let's go first. It seems that the general has a confidential military matter to discuss with Lord Nene. The other leaders of the horse gang understood what he meant. Suddenly, they let out a burst of strange laughter. Then, they slowly moved forward. After everyone had gone a little farther, Shea let out a long sigh and stared at Nene. At this moment, both of them had the same expression. Their faces were red and it seemed that they didn't know how to open their mouth. They stared at each other like this for a long time. When their eyes met, they both burst out laughing at the same time. With this laughter, the atmosphere suddenly eased a lot. After Nene finished laughing, she sighed. Hey, why did you chase after me? Shea scratched his head and hesitated before shaking his head. I have something to say to you. I just feel that if I don't say it, my heart will feel uncomfortable. Nene's eyes changed. If you have something to say, just say it. Shea smiled bitterly. I only know that I have something to say. If I don't say it, it will feel uncomfortable. But after coming here, I realized that I don't even know what I want to say. Nene spat and said in dissatisfaction, Did you trick me? No. Shea frowned and shook his head again and again. After thinking hard for a while, he suddenly let out a long sigh and stared at Nina's face. What? I want to say to you, thank you. A trace of disappointment appeared in Nene's eyes, but then she laughed. Just a thank you? That's not necessary. I came to join the army to find a way out for my brothers. After Odin's men went south, there will be no way for us to survive on wildfire plains. Even if I didn't join you, I would have to find another place to live. Shea shook his head. No, I must thank you. Nene said unhappily, Humph. I heard it. All right, you've thanked me. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. After saying this, she turned her horse around. But then she heard Shea call out, Wait! What else do you want to say? Nene turned her head. Shea's face turned red. After hesitating for a long time, he finally squeezed out a sentence. Actually, I didn't do it because of you. Nene immediately cut him off. She stared at Shea's face. All right? I know what you want to say. You want to tell me that you didn't reject me because I'm ugly, right? Yes. Shea had just nodded when he suddenly felt that his answer was inappropriate. He quickly said, No, I didn't mean that you're ugly. What I mean is, you're right. That's what I meant. No, that's not what I meant. That's what I meant. Seeing Shea's helpless and sweaty appearance, Nene found it funny. But suddenly, a trace of sweetness appeared in her heart. She whispered, All right, I understand. You didn't reject me because of my appearance, right? Yes, that's what I meant. Shea finally relaxed. Nene's eyes flashed. She said softly, then, why? Shea sighed and frowned. I don't know myself. He seemed to have finally made up his mind. I'll tell you, I am a person, even my mind is in a mess. I'll tell you. You must not laugh at me, that I actually. Shea finally gritted his teeth. Actually, I don't even know how to tell if a woman's appearance is beautiful or ugly. Or perhaps, for me, a woman's appearance is something that even I am muddle-headed about. Thus, I really did not reject you because of your appearance. In fact, there are times when I feel that you are quite good-looking. Nene's face instantly turned red. I'd good-looking? When did you say sometimes? When was that? Shea gave a dry laugh and said, that? I can't remember. For example, right now. I feel that your current expression is not ugly at all. Nene uttered out an ah, and she quickly lowered her head. I want to say thank you to you, and I also want to say sorry. Shea sighed and said, I know that I rejected you because of your good intentions. However, it's not that I dislike you, it's just what? I don't know. Shea thought about it for a long time before releasing a long sigh. There was confusion in his eyes as he said, I don't know what is going on either. I don't even know what kind of woman I should like. Rather, I don't even know what it feels like to like someone. He appeared at a loss. After thinking about it for a moment, he smiled wryly and said, I think you are a very good person, really. Thank you. Nene's voice suddenly became incomparably soft. Truth be told, the people around me, Sharba and Green, they have been advising me for the past few days to simply marry you. Truth be told, I myself am somewhat shaken. However, I really do not understand what is going on with my own heart. Thus, I am sorry I cannot agree to it. Enough. Nene gently waved her hand and her eyes swept across Shea's face. Her voice became very soft and she said, Green and the others are advising you to marry me. Naturally, I understand their intentions. However, thank you for being so honest with me. Although you have rejected me, I am still very happy. If you were to marry me because of, I fear I would not be happy. Instead, I would look down on you. Hearing those words from Nene, Shea finally felt relieved. Heavens! Hearing you say that, I am relieved. I'm leaving. We'll talk about it when I come back. She urged her horse to take a few steps forward before suddenly coming to a halt. Ah, right, I nearly forgot something. There is an old acquaintance of yours who asked me to send his regards to you. I was in too much of a hurry yesterday and forgot to tell you about it. Old acquaintance? Who? Nene gave a sweet smile and said, Aunt Sophia. After saying that, her eyes swept over Shea. Then, she turned around and shouted before urging her horse to gallop away. Shea was dumbfounded. The words Aunt Sophia from Nene had surprised him. However, it had to be admitted. What truly stunned Shea was the final look in Nene's eyes before she left. This valiant and ferocious woman. When Shea saw that final look in her eyes, he felt a warmth that he had never felt before. Shea stood there in a daze for a long time. For a moment, he was at a loss as to what to feel. All he could do was to turn his horse around and slowly head back to Denzel City. On the way back, his mind was in a state of turmoil. As he was racking his brains to figure out what was going on with him, he suddenly heard a sneer within his mind. The sneer was filled with ridicule. It was none other than Dora's voice. What are you laughing at? Shea asked in a dissatisfied tone. Naturally, I am laughing at you, you silly kid. Dora's voice was filled with disdain. What is so funny about me? Shea harumphed. Then, he exhaled deeply and said, Sigh, no matter what, I have made things clear to her. That should be a way to get rid of a knot in my heart. Otherwise, it would be so unbearable for me. The tone of ridicule in Dora's voice grew stronger and she said, You little brat, do you think that by being honest with her, you can solve the problem? Humph. After saying those words, you will naturally feel happy. However, there is someone else who will be worried. You, what do you mean? Dora harumphed twice and said, let's just say that you are silly. Sometimes you are cunning and despicable. However, are you smart? Sometimes your stupidity is truly infuriating. Pausing for a moment, Dora did not wait for Shea to erupt in anger. Instead, she continued, I have heard that you humans have a saying, women need to be coaxed. Only by coaxing with flowery words can a woman be moved. However, I have also heard of another truth. Coaxing can only be deceived for a while, but telling the truth can be deceived for a lifetime. Shea was dumbfounded. Telling the truth and deceiving for a lifetime? What does that mean? Dora seemed to be extremely pleased. She laughed a few times and said, silly boy. Telling lies can be deceiving for a while, but once you are exposed, it will naturally be useless. However, if you tell the truth and it is a few words of truth that don't seem to be very kind, I am afraid that after hearing it, not only will she not be angry at you, but she will also feel that you are sincere, which will make the Me clan even more precious. Me? Don't you know? Your words of sincerity and sincerity, just now actually made the girl's heart even more secure. Please vote. Please recommend votes. Please vote monthly. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 283. GOR Chapter 269. Please hang my head. Medgar City, the capital city of Moore County. Smoke filled the air and many places within the city were ablaze. Atop the city walls, smoke billowed out from the beacon tower and a huge pillar of smoke rose up into the sky. The black smoke had been rising for a total of 3 days. The sounds of battle on the city walls had gradually subsided. Cries for their fathers and mothers could be heard everywhere. The soldiers who were still alive had looks of despair on their faces. Some were injured and rolled about in pain, while the others, who were not injured, had looks of fear on their faces. Medgar City was the capital city of Moore County and also the largest city within Moore County. However, it was different from Denzel City. Denzel City was a military town located at the border and had always been the location of the garrison. Additionally, it had also experienced the war against Odin. As a war zone command post, the city walls were built according to the standards of the Empire's military fortresses. However, despite being the capital city, the city walls of Medgar City were much shorter compared to Denzel City. Additionally, the Empire's military was in disarray and the city walls had not been repaired for many years. Many parts of the city walls were already damaged. At present, after experiencing the baptism of war, the city walls, which were not majestic, were already on the verge of collapse. Corinthia stood atop the city walls. This 46-year-old magistrate of Moore County was a civilian official. However, at present, he was dressed in military attire. The armor that he wore pressed down on his somewhat frail body, seemingly unable to bear the burden. However, this 46-year-old magistrate had a resolute expression on his face. He continued to stand upright and brandished his sword, desperately urging the terrified soldiers around him. Corinthia ran back and forth a few times. He kicked and beat up several soldiers who were huddled up in the corner and shouted, "Hold! Continue to hold! Those who retreat will be executed!" Although his voice was somewhat sharp and frail, at present, it revealed a sense of majesty. Under the magistrate's forceful order, the crumbling soldiers were barely able to reorganize themselves. There were less than 200 soldiers left on the city walls. Although they had barely managed to repel 2 attacks by Odin's men, Corinthia knew one thing. This city cannot be defended. One side of Medgar City was a mountain, while the other 3 sides were flat plains. The surrounding land was fertile for hundreds of miles. In the wilderness outside the city, the flag of the Scarlet Snow Army was fluttering in the wind. A huge military camp had been set up. Odin's warriors had been besieging the city for 3 full days. They had been shouting and yelling day and night. The earth-shattering roars and the pressing horn had slowly destroyed the last glimmer of hope in the hearts of the Empire's defenders on the city wall. Standing on the city wall, the Odin's barracks outside the city had already surrounded Metter City. Krincia knew very well that the reason he was able to defend the city for 3 days wasn't because of how good his defense was, nor was it because of the bravery of his soldiers. The real reason was that these Odin people didn't even bother to attack the city. Manning's Scarlet Snow Army had traveled a long distance. They had given up on attacking Denzel City and headed south. Naturally, their biggest target was Metter City. The capital of Moore County was where the wealth of the entire county lay. There were countless merchants in the city, and they had stockpiled food, taxes, and wealth. There were also tens of thousands of people. However, when Manning's army arrived, they only surrounded the city outside. They didn't attack the city immediately. Instead, they split up into teams and spread out outside the city. They searched from village to village to village to village to search. Odin's people were collecting food. The Scarlet Snow Army had exhausted all their food and had fallen to the point of slaughtering their mount. Under Manning's leadership, they didn't immediately attack the rich city that they were envious of. Instead, they split up almost half of their forces to spread out in the surrounding villages to collect food as quickly as possible. Manning led the remaining forces to continue besieging Metter City to prevent the defenders from escaping. His strategy was very successful. When Grim in Denzel City received the news that Odin's people were heading south, Grim had already sent someone to Metter City to deliver the news. Even the person who delivered the news brought along Grim's suggestion: scorch the earth by yourself. However, Krincia rejected Grim's suggestion. After all, he was the governor of Moore County and a civilian official. After all, he wasn't as ruthless as Grim. He hesitated again and again. He really couldn't come up with such a ruthless strategy. He could only order all the garrison troops in the city to prepare for battle. However, even though Manning's army had been delayed for a few days in Denzel City, the army was still intact. Once they arrived at Metter City, Krincia immediately understood that he couldn't defend it. There was only 1 battalion of garrison troops in the city. Although the armaments were relatively complete, even if some young and strong men were temporarily mobilized in the city, and even if Krincia and some of the rich officials in the city sent all their servants to the city, it still looked sparse. There were only a little more than 1,000 people. The Odin army was busy looting everywhere. During the 3 days, the Odin army's small teams crisscrossed the countryside. At night, Corinthia stood on the city wall and could see flames soaring into the sky from the direction of many villages. These Odin's people were like locusts wreaking havoc. In the past 3 days, he could see those small troops of Odins who were plundering everywhere. They were pulling carts full of animals and returning to the camp outside the city. There were also many villagers and farmers from the surrounding villages who were driven here by Odin's iron hooves and swords. They acted as coolies, cutting trees everywhere, making military equipment for Odin's people, digging trenches, building camps. Miserable cries could be heard outside the city at night. The 3 sieges of Odin's people were just for show. Before the small troops that were plundering everywhere returned, Odin's people wouldn't really attack the city. It was just to maintain the pressure on the city. However, even though they had only pretended to attack the city 3 times, less than 300 of the 1,000 soldiers that had been temporarily put together on the city wall were left. And those who were still alive were obviously in a constant state of panic. Krincia wasn't Shea, nor was he green. He didn't have personal bravery, nor did he have a strategy to boost morale before battle. He only ordered the tax collected from the city's treasury to be moved over 10 boxes of coins and piled them outside the city walls. He used the rewards to recruit the young men in the city. At first, there were some results. Many people signed up for the rewards. But after the 3 sieges of Odin's people, most of the first batch of people who went up the city walls were dead. The remaining people were terrified. Even though there were mountains of coins outside the city walls, there were very few people who signed up. Odin's people outside the city weren't in a hurry to attack the city. They just made a ruckus every day and wreaked havoc in the surrounding villages. At this moment, Krincia was already exhausted standing on the city walls. Although he wasn't injured under the protection of a few guards, the shock in his heart made his mind go blank. When Odin's people were sieging the city, a stray arrow almost took his life. If it wasn't for a loyal guard beside him who hurriedly pushed him away, he would have been shot through by the arrow. However, that loyal guard was pierced through the heart by an arrow and nailed to the city gate tower alive. Odin's people were valiant and barbaric. Unexpectedly, their arrows were also so powerful. This made the living people even more terrified. In the evening, the camp of Odin's people was lit up. There were also smoke rising from the chimneys. Looking at the roads in the distance, teams of Odin's people were returning with a full load. There were also many farmers and villagers who were chasing the captive. Krincia's lips were already bleeding from biting. With great willpower, he forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. "Sir," a soft voice came from behind him. Krincia turned around and saw the one who spoke. It was the tax collector from the county governor's mansion. The tax collector's face was also pale. If it weren't for the fact that he was supporting himself against the wall, he would have fallen to the ground. "Sir, Odin's people perhaps?" "Perhaps what?" Krincia's voice was hoarse. "Perhaps they won't attack the city tomorrow." The tax collector's face was pale. "From what I can see, the small teams they sent out have all returned. Even if they are gathering food, they should have gathered enough. Looking at the flames in the surroundings, I fear that the nearby villages and towns are already caught in the flames of war. I heard that they didn't attack Denzel City. Perhaps, after gathering enough food, they will head south." Krincia shook his head and said, "No, they will definitely attack the city. They will not let us go." The county governor's face was pale and he smiled bitterly. "Although I don't know much about military strategy, I do know that an army needs food supplies. They didn't attack Denzel City because that green fellow was ruthless enough to burn down all the land and food supplies in the villages and towns outside the city. That forced the Odin's people to rush south to gather food supplies. But we are different. Just look outside. Look at how badly the Odin's people have been wreaking havoc for the past 3 days. We are now a piece of juicy meat. How could they not bite us? The reason they didn't bite us a few days ago was because they needed to recover their strength first. At any rate, we are a piece of juicy meat. They have already trapped us to death. Even if they leave us here, we won't be able to escape." Pausing for a moment, Krincia then lowered his voice and continued, "Besides, I am the county governor. I know very well that the Odin's people will definitely break into our city. A few days ago, the taxes for the spring season had just been collected. Thus, these days, the farmers in the villages and towns did not have much food stored away. Even if the Odin's people were to plunder everything, how many days could the food of their tens of thousands of soldiers last? But we are different. Right now, the city has stored up the taxes for the entire county's food supplies. If we were to fall into their hands, it would be enough to last the Odin's people for 2 months. How could they let us go?" After saying that, Krincia smiled bitterly and continued, "Even if it is for the sake of plundering these supplies, they will never abandon us and head south." The county governor sighed softly and said, "Unfortunately, I am too pedantic. I did not learn from Green's strategy of scorching the earth. Actually, even if I had learned from Green, it would have been useless. The Odin's people had already abandoned Denzel City for us. Now that they are here, they have been forced into a dead end." No matter what, they will snatch the food supplies to attack the city. The tax official said furiously, "It is all because of that green. If he had not acted recklessly, the Odin's people would not have abandoned them and rushed here so quickly. He is ruthless enough to drag us down with him." "Shut up!" Krincia shouted out furiously and said, "What are you talking about? Denzel City is the military headquarters of an entire county. Protecting them is far more valuable than protecting us. As long as Denzel City remains, our county's garrison army will remain. It is a nail that has been planted into the back of the Odin's people. I do not hate Green's actions. Instead, I am grateful for him. I only hate myself for being too pedantic and not having the courage to make a prompt decision. If I had that kind of courage, the Odin's people would not even be able to snatch these supplies." The tax official sighed and said, "My lord, it is too late to say anything now. It seems we may not be able to defend the city until tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night?" Krincia sneered and said, "By tomorrow morning, the Odin's people will surely break into the city." The tax official was about to say something when he suddenly heard a shout coming from the city behind him. "Fire! The storehouse is on fire!" Turning around, he saw flames rising up into the sky from deep within the city. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the storehouse. The tax official's face sank and he said, "My lord! The storehouse! The storehouse is on fire! This is bad! All of our supplies are there. Could it be there are spies among the Odin's people in the city?" He was about to rush down the city when Krincia grabbed him. The county governor's face was filled with determination as his eyes flashed. He had a frail and gentle face, but at that moment, there was a ferocious look on his face. "Don't go. It is not a spy among the Odin's people. I sent a few of my personal guards to do it." Krincia's eyes were as sharp as a knife as he turned around and stared at the fire in the city. The storehouse in the city was the tax reserves of the entire county. Once it was on fire, the fire would rise up into the sky and almost burn half of the sky red. The thick smoke billowed up into the sky and made people tremble with fear. The tax official was stunned for a moment. But when he saw Krincia's expression, he suddenly understood. He said in a low voice, "My lord." "Humph." Krincia bit his lips and allowed the blood to flow out. He sneered and said, "If we don't burn it ourselves, are we going to leave it for the Odin's people to eat after we break into the city?" As he said that, he suddenly roared and raised his hands up into the sky. "I hate it! I hate it! I hate the spies in the empire! I hate the decline of the country! My Byzantium has been established for thousands of years. Have we really reached the end of the road? God, are you blind?" His voice was hoarse and he cried blood with every word. In the Odin's camp outside the city, Manninger was eating dinner when a general under him came in and asked for orders. "Patriarch, let us attack the city tomorrow morning. The warriors had eaten their fill and rested enough. The defenders of Metter are too weak. These Byzantium sheep, I can break the city gate in 2 hours at most." Manninger smiled gently. "Of course, it's time to eat this fat piece of meat." He was laughing when he heard someone rushing in anxiously from outside. When he saw that it was the leader of his personal guards, he immediately knelt in front of him. "Patriarch, there is a fire in the city." Manninger's expression suddenly changed and he rushed out in big strides. He looked up and saw a red light in the direction of Metter. Manninger only took a glance and immediately shouted and stomped his feet. He immediately turned his head and shouted, "Pass the order! Attack the city immediately! Quick! Let the warriors attack the city immediately! Rush in as soon as possible at all costs! Quick!" Odin's attack was indeed swift and fierce, and the general who boasted to Manninger did not lie. In 2 hours the city gate was broken. Odin's people drove straight into the city, and almost did not encounter any decent resistance. But when they were about to reach the storehouse, they had no choice but to stop. Where the storehouse was, the whole street had turned into a sea of fire. The fire was all over the sky. How could it be extinguished by human power? Although Manninger had ordered his soldiers to try their best to put out the fire, but with such a big fire, even if Odin's people did their best, they could not control it. The fire burned until the next morning, and there was no sign of it being extinguished. Odin's people did their best, but they could not get much food. At dawn, in Manninger's tent, several Odin's soldiers pushed a man in. Patriarch, this guy led his men to fight desperately near the fire. In the end, all the people around him died, but he suddenly shouted that he was the governor and wanted to see our general. We saw that he seemed to be a leader, so we captured him alive and presented him to you. Manninger looked at the man in front of him. His clothes were tattered, and there were blood stains everywhere. His armor was taken off, but his robe was black and red, and his hair was burnt in many places. But with Manninger's eyes, he could tell at a glance that this man was not a warrior at all. His heart skipped a beat, and he stood up and walked in front of him. Who are you? This man was naturally Corinthia. He raised his head and stared at Manninger proudly. Governor of the Byzantine Empire's Morel County, Corinthia. So it is you. Manninger's expression was not stern, but rather polite. I am the Patriarch of the Odin Bashak, the commander of the Scarlet Snow Army, Manninger. Your Excellency Corinthia, since you have lost, why do you want to see me? I just want to see what the enemy leader who dares to invade my territory looks like. Corinthia laughed coldly. Manninger's expression did not change. You were the one who ordered to burn my food, right? Corinthia was instantly furious and scolded. Bastard thief! What do you mean by your food? That is all of the Byzantine Empire's food. When did it become yours? What a bandit! His words made the surrounding Odin soldiers furious, and they immediately received 2 kicks. Manninger waved his hand and asked the people around him to move away. He stood in front of Corinthia and smiled faintly. All right, it doesn't matter who it was. Anyway, it has been burned. He muttered to himself for a while and said, Corinthia, I know your name. You have been the governor of Morel County for 7 years, right? In the 2 wars between your country and us, you were the governor of Morel County. You were responsible for the preparation of military equipment and food. In that case, your contribution in repelling our army the previous 2 times can be considered not small. Corinthia laughed coldly. It's a pity that I did not do well enough to help my country kill more Odin thieves. Manninger sighed. You Byzantium people just like to show off. I won't quarrel with you. I just want to ask you, you have been working in Morel County for 7 years. I heard that you have governed Morel County very well. Morel County is rich and fertile, and it is all thanks to you. It's a pity that you have not moved or been promoted for 7 years. It can be seen that the Byzantine Empire is incompetent to not use such a talent. I see that you are a capable person. Since the Byzantine Empire is incompetent, why don't you help me? After the war, Morel County will be my territory. Why don't you help me govern this place? I think. Speaking up to this point, he saw Corinthia looking at him with a cold smile. Manninger understood. What, you don't want to? What do you think? Corinthia rolled his eyes. All right. Manninger sighed. If you were the kind of person who would surrender, you would not have burned the food in the city. But, why did you refuse? The Byzantine Empire cannot use you, but I can use you. The Byzantine Empire is not good at judging people. Why are you so loyal to these idiots? Corinthia shook his head. There is no why. The empire has been established for 1,000 years. When the empire is in danger, how can there not be 1 or 2 loyal people who will die for it? Sir, please kill me. Manninger's expression was complicated. He looked at Corinthia with a hint of respect in his eyes. Do you have any other requests? Corinthia laughed. I am thirsty. Bring me a bowl of water. Manninger waved his hand, and someone immediately brought over a bowl of water. Corinthia drank it in one gulp and laughed. Refreshing. After a night of burning, my mouth is dry. Drinking this water is refreshing. I never thought that drinking water would be so refreshing. He threw the bowl aside and looked up at Manninger. Thank you very much. The second request, please be sure to cut off my head and hang it on the city wall. Why? Manninger sighed. Sir, I respect you. Even if you are going to die, I will leave your corpse intact. No. Please hang my head. Corinthia laughed proudly. Hang my head on the city wall because I want to see with my own eyes that you Odin people will be defeated the same way you fought your way in. Don't tell me you don't dare. Manninger was stunned for a moment, then laughed loudly. He waved his hand and shouted, Go! Behead him and hang his head on the city gate of Mesta. A few Odin vampires rushed over like wolves and tigers. Corinthia boldly smiled and fearlessly turned around, raising his head and puffing out his chest before walking out with large strides. After Corinthia left, Manninger turned around and walked back a few steps. He sat down heavily, and the anger on his face disappeared, replaced by a complicated and emotional expression. Not long after, someone came to report that Corinthia had been beheaded, and his head was hung on the city gate. Did he say anything before he died? The person who replied said in a low voice, No, but his eyes were wide open after his head was cut off. Manninger's expression was cold as he waved his hand. Got it, you may leave. After a while, the chief of the Bashak tribe sat alone in the tent, but he suddenly sighed softly. The country has been established for 1,000 years. When the country is in danger, how can there not be 1 or 2 loyal people who will die for it? He savored this sentence and sighed softly. Well said. Humph. I'm afraid this southern expedition is not as simple as it seems. Many years later, the disciple of the Empire's wise man, Cavashir, Lady Odin wrote a description of the Odin invasion. In the article, The Afterglow of the Last Dynasty, she wrote about the first city that the Odin people conquered in this invasion. Scarlet Snow Armies Comesta City. The Empire's county governor, Corinthia, burned all the food in the city and was captured. The enemy chief surrendered, but Corinthia refused and bravely died. His head was hung on the city gate for 10 days. His Excellency ruled for 7 years. The people of Moore County deeply felt his virtue and shed tears. At that time it was spring. The grass was long and eagles were flying. His Excellency's head was hung on the city gate tower. There were birds pecking at it. The people of the city requested to bury his head, but the enemy did not allow it. Therefore, the people of the city took the initiative to stay at the city gate and did not leave. They shot the birds with slingshots and did not allow them to peck at his head. Later generations shed tears when they heard about it. Sigh, towards the end of this chapter, I almost lost control of my emotions. To be honest, I really don't like to write stories about fighting monsters and adventures. Only when I write a paragraph like this can I write the feeling well. I beg for monthly vote. The monthly votes are not ideal. Everyone, check if there are any votes in your account. If there are, please help to vote. Again, don't force yourself to spend money to get vote. If there are votes, vote. If there are no votes, a subscription is the biggest support. Thank you. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 284. GOR Chapter 270. We're dead. The rumbling of war drums shook the heavens, and the urgent sounds of bugles mixed with the battle cries of the soldiers. The sound of the bugles nearly dispersed the clouds in the sky. On the plains, wave after wave of soldiers surged forward like a crazed tide. Then, they struggled to advance through the dense rain of arrows that covered the sky. They were like a frenzied tide as they slammed against the tall city walls. On the walls of Osgilla, the tens of ballistic cannons on the towers opened fire at the same time. On the walls, tens of thousands of arrows were fired at the same time. The catapults hidden within the walls also whistled through the air. When the tidal wave of rebel soldiers reached the riverbank, they left behind a trail of corpses. The rebel soldiers were mainly attacking from the southwest side of Osgiliath. There were 3 gates and 3 bridges that originally spanned across the river. After many days of fierce fighting, the bridges were now littered with corpses. The water of the river had turned a faint red color, and there were hundreds and thousands of corpses floating on the surface of the river. Looking from afar, the majestic walls of Osgiliath were already covered in smoke and fire. No matter how sturdy the walls were, after the rebels concentrated almost all of their catapults and bombarded a section of the wall continuously for many days, they finally managed to break through some of the walls. The rebel soldiers forced their way across the river like a tidal wave. They braved the crossbow bolts as they struggled to advance across the bridge. There were also some soldiers who were hiding beneath the crossbow bolt. After barely making it across more than half of the bridge, they lit up the fire arrows. They tied oil bags to the arrowheads and lit them up before firing them at the city gate. The city gates were quickly set ablaze. However, the soldiers on top of the towers risked their lives to poke their bodies out and pour down buckets of water to extinguish the flames. Occasionally, some of the soldiers who poked their bodies out of the city walls would be shot down by the rebel archers hiding below. The rebel soldiers had invested over 10,000 soldiers in the siege. However, there was still a 10,000-strong Armenian heavy infantry formation on the northwest side of the battlefield. They were in a tight formation and were keeping a close watch on the northwest side of the battlefield. In the northwest of the battlefield, a large camp had been set up on a low plateau, and the Empire's eagle flag was fluttering high in the air. These were the reinforcements that had come to reinforce the imperial capital. Just a few days ago, 2 of the central standing armies had finally broken through the numerous fallen areas along the way and arrived at Osgiliath after much difficulty. These 2 armies were the 2nd and 9th armies of the central standing armies of the Empire. During the last battle with the Odin on the Wildfire Plains, the 2nd Division was ambushed by the Hastings and was almost completely defeated. General Perizzoli was also killed in battle. After the war, the flag-bearer of the Rodria Cavalry Division, Soja, was transferred to take over. Although the Second Army had just gone through the pain of rebuilding, there were too many new recruits in the army, and they were far from being able to recover their fighting strength. However, the new general, Soja, was originally one of the top generals of the Rodria Cavalry Division. He was the subordinate that Adrik admired the most and even had the intention of letting him take over as the general of the Rodria Cavalry Division. Soja fought bravely and led the troops during training. During training, he ate and slept together with the soldiers and led by example. He was also a famous general of the Empire and quickly established his prestige in the army. Therefore, with him overseeing the new army, although they were still lacking in experience, their morale had recovered by more than half. The new general of the 9th Army was the former general of the Rodria Cavalry Division, the silver-haired Butler. Butler was an old and wise man, forthright and loyal. Although he was not as brave as Soja, he was more experienced. Furthermore, the losses of the 9th Army were not too great. After Butler took over, he quickly reorganized the troop. These 2 armies had arrived at Osgiliath a few days ago. Speaking of the arrival of these 2 armies, there was an interlude previously, when the Armenian rebels were attacking the city. Adrik had led a mixed group of local garrison troops to reinforce the city. Adrik had purposely let someone blow the bugle of the Rodria Cavalry Division to confuse the rebels, making them think that the Rodria Cavalry Division had arrived. Due to the prestige of the Rodria Cavalry Division, the rebels had no choice but to retreat. In the end, Adrik's 20,000 exhausted mixed infantrymen took advantage of the retreat of the rebels to enter the city. Hughes, who only found out the truth after the incident, was so angry that he almost vomited blood. If he had seen through Adrik's scheme earlier, The 20,000 troops that Adrik had brought over were all mixed troops that were temporarily transferred from the local garrison troops. Furthermore, they were exhausted from the long journey. If the rebels had directly sent out fresh troops to attack, they might have been able to defeat the reinforcements in one battle. However, once Adrik's reinforcements entered the city, they would be able to replenish their supplies. With the reinforcements in the city, it would be even more difficult to break through Osgiliath. The funny thing was that 3 days after Adrik entered the city, the 2nd and 9th armies arrived at the battlefield at almost the same time. Coincidentally, Sozha and Butler also repeated the same trick. Their armies appeared at the northeast and northwest corners of the battlefield. Almost coincidentally, they chose the same strategy as Adrik, blowing the bugle of the Rodria Cavalry Division in an attempt to confuse the rebels. How could Hughes, who had already been fooled once, fall for it again? He directly sent out a group of 10,000 men to seize the opportunity to attack. This strategy was indeed effective. After all, Sozha and Butler's armies had traveled a long distance and were exhausted. They were unable to break through the rebel army's blockade and did not have the opportunity to enter the city. They could only combine their forces and set up camp at the northwest corner of the battlefield. Fortunately, the two of them were veterans in the army. Since they were unable to enter the city, they immediately decided to split their forces and attack one of Osgiliath's citadels in the northwest. That citadel was originally occupied by the rebel army, but after it was retaken by the Empire's army, the food and military equipment stored in the citadel were returned to the Empire's army. After receiving the supplies, the two of them did not even think of charging into the city. They peacefully set up camp at the northwest highlands outside the city and faced off against the rebel army, maintaining the pressure on the rebel army. When the two of them combined their forces, their military strength reached around 40,000, which was enough to deter the rebel army. When the rebel army besieged the city, they had no choice but to divert their forces to guard against their sneak attack. This also reduced the pressure on Osgiliath. In addition to Sozha and Butler's 2 divisions, Adrik's reinforcements, and the original city guards in Osgiliath, the Empire's military strength had reached around 80,000. Their military strength had been greatly increased. However, the situation was still not optimistic. Because the Empire's army had received reinforcements, the rebel army outside the city had also received a large amount of reinforcements. Their military strength still greatly exceeded that of the Empire's army. After the Armenian rebel army failed to attack the city, Hughes gave up on the plan to attack the city. He only maintained 2 or 3 feints a day to maintain the pressure on the city's defenses. In addition, he continued to mobilize more troops from the military districts of Armenia. He mobilized another 10,000 men, and the number of rebel soldiers in Armenia exceeded 50,000. And in the past few days, the rebel army from all over the country had also sent troops. Salvatore did not go back on his words. As the chairman of the Red Round Table Conference, he issued a call to arms and gathered all the rebel military districts to respond. In an instant, 21 military districts in the northern part of the empire mobilized their troops at the same time. Salvatore also wrote very clearly in the order, there was no room for negotiation at this moment. There was only one path left between the empire and the imperial family. Either you die or I live. If we can't destroy the imperial family in one battle and eliminate all future troubles, no one will be able to survive in the future. It must be known that the Byzantine Empire's Tema military district system had 100 years of history. There were a total of 46 Tema military districts in the empire, and most of them were in the northern part of the empire. This was because in the early days, the empire's Tema military district system was set up to resist the Odin's people. Naturally, most of the military districts were set up in the northern part of the empire to resist the Odin's people. In an instant, the military districts in the northern part of the empire rebelled, and all the governors gathered their troops towards Osgilla. The 21 military districts in the northern part of the empire all came under Salvator's call. The strength of each military district varied. The smallest brought 8,000 to 9,000 men, while the largest brought 20,000 to 30,000 men. After Salvator himself ran back to his own military district, he brought 40,000 men in one go. There was even a cavalry division of 20,000 men. At this time, the rebel army outside Osgilla had already exceeded 300,000 men. Hughes was also as shrewd as before. He took out all the equipment that had been stored in the warehouses of the military districts of Armenia for many years and sold them to the rebel army from all over the country at a low price. With the excellent equipment produced by Armenia, the rebel army's fighting power instantly increased greatly. Moreover, the surrounding 3 prefectures had already fallen, and large amounts of food had been conscripted over. There was no need to worry about the food. The equipment was excellent, and their military strength was several times that of the enemy. In addition, the cooperation between the various governors was in a honeymoon period. With more than 20 rebel governors gathered together, even the always cautious Salvator felt that with the current strength, even if Osgilla was the most majestic city on the continent, with their own strength, they would be able to break through this majestic city within half a year. At that time, as long as the Crenma royal family was wiped out, then in the future, although Osgilla's defenses were majestic, no matter how strong the city was, it would not be able to be defended forever. Moreover, Osgilla's biggest problem right now was food. As the capital of the empire with a population of more than 1 million at its peak, Osgilla's daily food requirements could not be met by just relying on the production of the surrounding villages and towns. Normally, Osgilla's food would need to be transported from the surrounding areas, as well as from the various large trade associations. On one hand, this caused the city's trade routes to flourish. On the other hand, it also caused the city to have a fatal flaw: the need for blood. Once the blood supply from the outside was cut off, for example, at this moment, when the imperial capital was besieged, the trade routes were naturally cut off, and the surrounding areas had indeed fallen. The food in the city could only be used from the previous reserve. Every bit they ate was a little less, and there was no way to replenish it. As for a large city with a population of more than 1 million, coupled with the wartime expenditure of the military, the daily expenditure of such a large number of people was a huge figure. Even if the royal family had paid attention to hoarding supplies, how much could they hoard? That was more than 1 million mouths. Each person ate 2 jin of food every day. That was 2 million jin a day. That was 1,000 tons a day. Although there were some farmlands and gardens in the city, as well as some livestock, with just these, how long could they last? The only thing they needed to worry about was the sea transportation route. Osgilla was surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, and it was a city with a peninsula terrain. After the land routes were blocked, the only way to resupply the city was through the sea route. However, in the past few days, the rebel army had sent out a portion of their forces to gather up a number of ships to seal off the sea route. It was not that the Byzantine Empire did not have a navy. However, the empire's navy had been suppressed by the Lantis for decades. That was especially true when the Lantis occupied the inland sea. Thus, the empire's navy could only cruise within the inland sea. Naturally, they were unable to grow stronger. The number of warships and the number of people in the navy was not high. Back then, the best opportunity had been to seize the inland sea route. In the end, Merlin, the peerless expert of the time, intervened, causing the Byzantine Empire to be unable to seize the opportunity. As a result, the decline of the navy continued. There was also a subtle situation within the empire. From the surface, it would appear that the empire's military was divided into 2 factions, the royal family and the warlord faction. However, if one were to look into it carefully, the empire's navy was a faction of its own. The empire's navy had always been a strange phenomenon. It was not completely loyal to the royal family, nor was it aligned with the warlord faction. If one were to look into the reason behind this, one would not know whether to laugh or cry. If the Navy wanted to grow, it would require a large amount of material and financial resources. For many years, in order to contend with the warlord faction, the royal family could only use their limited financial resources to support the central standing army that was loyal to the royal family. Just the Rhoderia army alone was already a huge expenditure. How could the empire's central government have the extra financial resources to build a large navy? As for the warlord faction, they did not even have enough time to expand their own strength. Naturally, they would not spend money on the navy. The interest groups of the navy had always been the biggest victims. Without the support of the central government, the annual military expenditure was extremely limited. This caused the navy to gather a deep resentment. It was not that the empire did not want to reorganize the navy. It was not that they did not want to regain control of the sea. However, as long as the warlord faction was not eliminated, the royal family would be in a precarious situation. How could they have the energy to care about the navy? The result of this was that the navy became more and more disappointed with the empire's central government. Although they did not directly stand on the side of the warlord faction, their loyalty to the royal family was only based on the official correspondence. At this moment, Osgiliath was besieged. The rebels gathered a group of temporary boats and dared to seal off the sea. This was not without reason. Just before the war, Salvador sent a letter to the Navy High Command stationed in Hainan. He sent someone to personally hand the letter to the Empire's current Admiral Rent. The letter clearly stated that as long as you do not help either side, all the members of the Red Round Table after the war will recognize the Navy's status as an independent force. Salvador's letter used both soft and hard words to clearly state the current situation. With the current strength comparison, the royal family had almost no chance of winning. If the Navy stood on the wrong side at this time, then they could only be buried with the royal family. When the warlords won the war, all parts of the mainland would be the territory of the warlords. Even if the Navy dominated the sea, they still needed a foothold on the mainland and a military base to survive. If they offended the warlords on the mainland, they could only be pirates on the sea in the future. Salvador even promised that as long as the Navy did not make a move after the war, he would cede 3 coastal cities from the territories of the 2 warlords on the northern coastal line of the inland sea to the Navy to build a military base. The 3 cities and the surrounding land would be given to the Navy, which was almost half the size of a county, enough for the Navy to establish themselves in the future. Sure enough, after the letter was sent, the Navy had not made any moves until today. Listening to the deafening sound of horns and drums outside, and the sounds of killing came in bursts, Salvador sat in the tent with a calm expression. Although he could tell that today's siege seemed to have failed again, he was not worried at all. Osgiliath was the most majestic city on the mainland, and there were almost no weaknesses to take advantage of. It was impossible to break this city without spending some time. The only way was to fight with attrition and use human lives to fill the gap. In the end, when the city was exhausted and out of ammunition and food, it would be the best opportunity to break the city. There was no need for any tricks, and there was no need to think about taking advantage of the situation. They just had to use their own forces that were several times the opponent's and press forward until the other side was crushed. Now that things had come to this, the Byzantium royal family had no chance of winning at all. The outcome was set. Even if Cavashir was still alive, there was no way he could turn the situation around. Salvador also received news that Odin's men had gone south. But he was not worried that Odin's men would take advantage of the situation. Because this time, Odin's men went south because Salvador and the Odin Empire had reached an agreement. He even had a letter personally written by the Odin Emperor in which the two sides agreed that the Odin's army would go south and only take 4 counties directly under the central administration in the northern part of the empire as their territory. At the same time, Odin's army would also arrive at Osgiliath and join forces with the rebel army to attack the city of Osgiliath. Therefore, no matter how one looked at it, the Byzantine Empire's royal family was doomed this time. They were doomed. In the tent, Hughes looked at Salvatore coldly. At this moment, Salvatore was no longer the person who had fled the imperial capital in a sorry state. As the chairman of the Red Round Table Conference, Salvatore was in high spirits. In fact, it was not only Salvatore who was in such a state. Even the various governors in the tent, as well as some governors who did not come personally, were also in a good mood. Right at this moment, a loud bugle call suddenly came from afar. The bugle call was short and urgent, with each call faster than the previous one. The rhythm was unique and distinct. This sound was clearly different from the bugle call on the battlefield, and it immediately attracted the attention of the rebel army leaders in the tent. Immediately, an Armenian rebel army officer ran in and reported loudly, "My lord! The bugle call of the Rhodrian cavalry has sounded from behind us." Rhodrian? Hughes stood up and sneered. The Rhodrian cavalry is still blocked in the central northern region. Humph! It must be some reinforcements coming up with this trick again. Back then, Adric had tricked me once. Later, when Sophia and Butler tried to trick me again, I saw through it. Now, someone is using the bugle call of the Rhodrian cavalry to trick me again? Have the rear camp mobilize 10,000 men to check out the situation. If there is an opportunity, we will devour these reinforcements. After having his subordinates leave, Hughes laughed out and said, "Come, let's continue drinking." Humph! These fellows keep using the name of the Rhodrian cavalry to scare us. Do they really think that the Rhodrian cavalry is invincible? Even if the real Rhodrian cavalry were to come, with over 300,000 soldiers, would we be afraid of 20,000 Rhodrian cavalry? Moments later, the bugle call of the rebel army could be heard. The sound of war drums shaking the heavens could be heard from the rear camp, and the sounds of battle could be heard from afar. Even within the large tent, they could hear the sounds of battle coming from the direction of the rear camp, sweeping over like a tidal wave. Inside the tent, the faces of many people turned pale. That was because they could see with their own eyes that the wine glass on the table before them was vibrating gently. Horse hooves! Horse hooves! Only a large-scale cavalry charge could cause such a huge tremor. In just a moment, someone from the outside scrambled into the tent. Throwing himself on the ground, he shouted, "Sir! It really is the Rhodrian cavalry! It really is the Rhodrian cavalry! Our rear camp of 10,000 men has been defeated." Hughes could only feel a whung sound in his mind. He immediately shouted out and rushed out. Behind him, the other rebel army leaders also ran out. Hughes rushed to the nearest lookout tower and frantically climbed up. He raised his head to look in the direction of the rear camp. Far away in the wilderness outside the rear camp, a group of soldiers and horses were engaged in a fierce battle. A large number of cavalry soldiers descended like a dark cloud. Their grayish-black attire was the color of the armor of the Rhodrian cavalry. Tens of thousands of cavalry soldiers galloped across the battlefield. The 10,000 men in the rear camp had been cut into several pieces and had long since been defeated. The enemy cavalry soldiers calmly charged forward from the sides, cutting the defeated rebel army into small pieces and swallowing them up into the grayish-black tide of cavalry soldiers. Hughes picked up his binoculars and observed the distant hillside. Beneath a group of cavalry soldiers was a tall and big red warhorse. Riding on the horse was a tall and sturdy figure. Clad in golden armor, his face was round like a plate, wide face and big ears. There was a trace of a crafty smile on his face, and he was in high spirits. This was the famous rabbit general of the kingdom, Ruhr. Behind him, a huge war drum was being beaten loudly. Beneath the war drum was a man with 2 hammers in his hand. His upper body was bare, revealing his strong muscles. His hair was disheveled as he beat the drum. This was not the drummer of the army. His head of golden hair fluttered in the wind. Shockingly, it was the publicly acknowledged weak and old-fashioned Crown Prince, Garcia. I am sweating. Tonight, the North Koreans are so miserable. This is the biggest score in the recent World Cup, 7 o'clock am. I look forward to Spain's victory tonight. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 285. GOR Chapter 271. Brilliant! His Highness, the Crown Prince, personally beat the drums to boost the morale of the roadrear cavalrymen. Again and again, the cavalrymen merrily charged into the rebel army's formation, recklessly galloping back and forth across the battlefield. Brandishing their sabers and lances, they reaped the heads of the rebel army. Although the roadrear cavalrymen had been rebuilt, they still maintained a large number of their old formation. These elite cavalrymen who had been through hundreds of battles displayed cunning and ruthlessness on the battlefield. Often, after the rebel army's formation was broken, they would reorganize themselves and put in some effort to form a decent defensive formation. However, the cavalrymen would instantly charge back and scatter them. After a few such incidents, the rebel army was no longer able to put up any decent resistance. Seeing the defeat of the rebel army in the rear camp attempted to organize reinforcements. However, the roadrear cavalrymen were very cunning. Perhaps this cunning style was a change brought about by Fatso and Ruhr's arrival. In the past, the roadrear cavalrymen's charge was filled with a courageous spirit. If they did not advance, they would die. Now, however, they seemed to have transformed into a poisonous snake. Bite after bite, each bite was fatal. Their viciousness did not diminish in the slightest as they specifically targeted the weakest point of the rebel army. That was especially true after the 10,000-man formation of the rebel army was destroyed. Soon, 2 teams of cavalrymen split up from the flanks and circled around the rear of the rebel army to surround them. Then, the cavalrymen wantonly charged back and forth, turning the battlefield into a one-sided massacre. As for the rebel army who rushed out from the main camp to provide support, they were blocked by the roadrear cavalrymen. There was simply no chance for them to get out. The roadrear cavalrymen who had circled around to the rear would occasionally feign an attack on the rebel army's rear camp, forcing the rebel army to desperately fire arrows at the roadrear cavalrymen. When the reinforcements from the rebel army's rear camp finally reached a certain number, the roadrear cavalrymen no longer entangled themselves with the enemy. After a series of bugles, the cavalrymen who had circled around to the rear happily charged through the battlefield. While they were at it, they slaughtered the rebel army once more before calmly retreating. The 10,000-man rebel army had suffered such a huge loss. 1/3 of the corpses were left on the battlefield. Wails and cries could be heard all over the battlefield. Some of the scattered rebel soldiers who had escaped gathered together in 2s and 3s. Finally, they found the opportunity to escape and they madly ran back to their own camp. In just an hour's time, a single charge from Roadrear's cavalry had completely decimated the rebel army's 10,000-strong phalanx formation. Less than 1/10 of them managed to make it back alive and in good condition. Far away on the high ground, the cheers of the roadrear cavalrymen could be heard from afar. Following which, approximately 200 cavalrymen charged into the battlefield. These cavalrymen dismounted from their horses as though there was no one else around. They didn't even look at the rebel army's main camp 100 meters away as they began to clean up the battlefield. This was also a tradition of the continent. After both sides finished a battle, the victorious side would have the priority to clean up the battlefield. Cleaning up the battlefield would also include treating the wounded on one side. At the same time, if the enemy's wounded soldiers were discovered, if they were of a high rank, they would immediately be captured. As for the lower-ranked soldiers, they would usually be dealt a final blow. It could be said that the side that cleaned up the battlefield first would often be able to take advantage of the opportunity to expand their gains. The tradition of the continent had always been that the strong would be respected. The victorious side had the right to clean up the battlefield first. At this time, the defeated side would not be able to send their troops forward to fight. Otherwise, they would be seen as cowards. Due to his own carelessness, he had caused a 10,000-man army to be crippled in such a short period of time. Hughes, who was standing on the observation platform, felt a sharp pain in his heart. He was so angry that his vision turned black. The 10,000-man army from the rear camp was his own Armenian army. He had been tricked several times before. Starting from Adrik, followed by Sophia and Butler, they had deliberately used the roadrear cavalryman's banner and bugle to deceive him. In the end, Hughes had been deceived too many times and naturally became numb. This time, when the roadrear cavalryman really arrived, he had been careless and thought that it was a trick of the enemy. He had underestimated the enemy and only sent out 10,000 men to take advantage of the situation. He didn't expect that he would lose so much of his strength for nothing. Now that he saw the roadrear cavalrymen send out to clean up the battlefield, how could Hughes not know about this tradition? He felt a sharp pain in his heart. During the previous siege, his army had lost some troops because he was too greedy and rashly attacked the city. Today, he had lost a few thousand men. How could he not feel heartache? It must be known that no matter where in this world, the strong would be respected. Everything depended on strength. Although he had some status in the Red Round Table Conference, but if his strength was damaged too much, it would be difficult to maintain his position. Although all the governors were in the same boat through thick and thin, it was still the honeymoon period of cooperation and was far from the time to fall out. But everyone understood that when it was time to divide the cake after the war, only the stronger military region would be able to get a bigger share of the spoils of war. Moreover, after so many days of sieging the city, he had only lost 3,000 to 5,000 men. But today, after being charged by the roadrear cavalrymen, he had lost so many men in just 2 hours. How could he not feel heartache? Just when he was about to vomit blood, a subordinate beside him suddenly whispered, "Ah, sir! Quickly look! Those roadrear cavalrymen didn't kill our wounded." Hughes raised his head and gazed into the distance. Indeed, the roadrear cavalrymen who were sweeping the battlefield only dismounted and carefully scoured the battlefield. They tried their best to locate the wounded cavalrymen who had fallen from their mounts and carried them back. However, as for the wounded rebel cavalrymen who were lying on the battlefield, they didn't pull out their blades to finish them off. In fact, they didn't even spare them a glance. This Roar. Is he really so kind? General, why are you so soft on these rebels? On the high ground, a young officer beside Roar seemed to be a little dissatisfied and whispered, "These rebels deserve to die. Why don't you let our people finish them off? Are you going to let those guys save the wounded soldiers and heal their wounds before coming back to fight us?" Roar rode on his horse. The proud expression on his face had long faded. He squinted his small eyes and looked at the battlefield. Suddenly, he sighed softly. "Forget it. The ones who die are the Byzantium people. Whether we win or lose this time, leave some strength for Byzantium." When the young officer beside him heard this, a strange look flashed across his eyes. He seemed to have something to say, but finally hesitated and closed his mouth. "I know, you must think that I'm indecisive and soft-hearted, right?" Roar sneered. The officer immediately bowed his head. "My lord, I dare not." "Dare not? Does that mean you really think that way?" Roar snorted, then whispered, "Idiot, of course it's easy to kill them. There won't be any trouble with just one slash. But don't you understand? Anyway, these wounded soldiers have lost their fighting strength. If we don't kill them and let the rebels save the wounded soldiers, they will have to spare some people to take care of the wounded soldiers. They will also have to consume more medicine and supplies. This is a strategy to weaken the enemy. At this moment, the crown prince, who had taken off his shirt to beat the drum, threw down his drumstick and ran back. He casually draped his battle robe over his body, leaving his golden hair wild and wild. He mounted his horse and charged into the battlefield. Garcia rode his horse in a circle in front of the formation. Then, he raised his saber and shouted. The war horse immediately raised its front hoof. The crown prince shouted from his horse, "Our army is mighty! Rodrier, our iron hooves are invincible!" Almost everyone in the army had seen how the crown prince had cheered them on with his hammers and drums when the cavalry had charged. It has to be said that at this moment, in the eyes of the soldiers, Garcia had the halo of the crown prince above his head. He was the future emperor of the empire. As the future emperor of the empire, he was actually willing to come to the front line in person, put down his noble attitude, and personally beat the drums to cheer for the soldiers. Such actions undoubtedly made many soldiers have a much better impression of this crown prince. At this moment, he was galloping at the front of the formation. As a commanding officer, doing such a thing was a very inspiring thing. After being provoked by him, the army immediately responded. The cavalry immediately cheered and shouted, "Mighty! Invincible!" The cheering continued for 7 to 8 times before gradually dissipating. At this time, the soldiers looked at the crown prince in a different light. Sigh! What a smart crown prince! It was the young officer beside Roer who saw this scene and sighed softly. Roer raised an eyebrow and looked at this subordinate. "What did you say? General, can't you see that His Highness is buying the hearts of the soldiers?" This young officer leaned close to Roer and said in a low voice, "Recently, His Highness has been training with the soldiers in the army. On the way, he has also shared the joys and sorrows of the soldiers. Today, he even beat the drums in front of the front lines. This series of actions, isn't it to establish his authority in the army?" Pausing for a moment, this young officer's gaze became somewhat complicated. Originally, in the hearts of the low-ranking soldiers, the identity of the crown prince is simply like a god, incomparably supreme and noble. But now, His Highness' series of actions has greatly won the hearts of the soldiers. His Highness winning the hearts of the soldiers is also a good thing. Roer's expression was calm as he said this sentence casually. This young officer raised his eyelids and glanced at Roer. After hesitating for a moment, he continued, "But, Your Excellency, His Highness has taken the initiative to win the hearts of the soldiers and establish our prestige. You should know that you're the commander-in-chief of an army." When Roer heard this, he immediately narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes and shrouded this young officer. "Humph, you have quite the guts to speak." This young officer was shrouded by Roer's gaze, but he was not afraid. He slowly said, "Sir, I don't mean anything else. It's just that this is the most delicate time. Historically, the royal family has never personally taken command of the army. Even if it was the Qigong Emperor himself, when he personally went to the battlefield, he would not easily take away the command rights of the generals under his subjects. What are you trying to say?" Roer picked his ear and sneered. This young officer gritted his teeth and looked around. Beside him were Roer's most trusted personal guards. Moreover, they were standing far away from the two. Finally, he whispered, "Sir, if I may ask, what are your chances of winning against Osgilla?" Roer stared at this young officer, and this officer also bravely looked back at Roer. Finally, after a while, Roer shook his head. "The chances of winning are not high." Hearing this young officer raised his eyebrows. "Sir, you are not telling the truth. In this subordinate's opinion, the chances of winning are not only not high, but very low." Roar had a smile that was not a smile on his face. That's right. The young officer pondered for a moment. With the current situation, although Osgilla has gathered 3 divisions of the Empire's Central Army, together with the city's garrison and the Imperial Army, his military strength has reached 100,000. Logically speaking, although the rebel army claims to have more than 300,000, Osgilla is the most majestic city in the continent. With 100,000 soldiers defending it, let alone 300,000, even if there were twice as many, we might not be able to take it down. The situation seems optimistic, but sir, you naturally know, in fact, we are at an absolute disadvantage. What do you mean? Roar closed his eyes. Although we have 100,000 soldiers, we are all rootless grass. The rebel army has 300,000 soldiers and is fully equipped with armor. Osgilla is surrounded by rebel territory and is close to Armenia. They can continuously replenish their supplies. But what about us? We are far away from our encampment and have traveled a long distance to reinforce the imperial capital. We have long lost our foothold. Osgilla is also besieged. If we sit here, we will no longer be able to get any supplies from the outside. To put it bluntly, let's not talk about anything else. We don't need a lot. As long as both sides drag this out for a month, once we run out of supplies, even if our roadrear cavalry can fight, with an empty stomach, our war horses will not be able to run. Besides, we are cavalry. The consumption of cavalry is much higher compared to infantry. After saying that, the young officer carefully looked at Roar's face before continuing. So, in this subordinate's opinion, this war bodes ill for the Empire. We have no chance of winning this war. Continue. Roar's face remained expressionless as he closed his eyes to rest. Knowing that this is a war that we will most likely lose, sir. His Highness the Crown Prince is also a smart man. How could he not understand? Moreover, in this subordinate's opinion, when His Majesty sent the Crown Prince to our army, why did he not go to other places but chose our Roadrear Cavalry Division? Isn't it because the Roadrear Cavalry Division is the strongest army in the Empire? His Majesty sent the Crown Prince here to protect the Crown Prince. On the other hand, he left a backup plan. Backup plan? Roar smiled. Backup plan. The young officer's eyes flashed and he slowly said, "These days I have been carefully calculating. I have always felt that His Majesty's recent actions are truly admirable. It is as though he had already planned to break off relations with the warlords. He also knew that once the war starts, the imperial capital will be besieged. Therefore, he sent the Crown Prince away from the imperial capital and sent him to protect the Empire's strongest Roadrear Cavalry Division. At the same time, he is also a backup plan. If anything happens to the imperial capital, then... Hearing the hesitation in his subordinate's voice, Roar sneered. After saying so much, why are you afraid to continue? The young officer's face changed, and he finally made up his mind. Gritting his teeth. If anything happens to the imperial capital, if His Majesty is in danger, then as long as the Crown Prince is still alive, he can take over the throne at any time. He can use the name of the new emperor to lead the forces loyal to the Empire to continue resisting the rebellion. At that time, when the new emperor ascended the throne, if he didn't have a capable army, how could he convince the other powers? How can he control the situation? As for the choice, is there a better choice than the Roadrear Cavalry Division? As long as His Highness controls the Roadrear Cavalry Division, he can firmly control this army and establish his prestige. Then, we are loyal to the Empire. For the Crown Prince to win the hearts of the army is not a bad thing. Roar's casual tone caused the officer to show dissatisfaction. He frowned and said, "My lord, you cannot say that. I have absolutely no disloyalty to the Empire. It is just that His Highness' actions clearly show that he is on guard against you. Otherwise, why would His Highness act so pretentiously recently? We are fighting for the Empire, yet His Highness is suspicious of you. This makes one's heart turn cold. Enough! Ruhr's face suddenly became stern. After he shouted, the young officer lowered his head. Ruhr's face was as calm as still water. He said indifferently, "How can the Emperor's skills be understood by someone like you? Even the most loyal of subjects, as the Emperor, cannot place his hopes on the loyalty of others. Humph, the human heart is the most unreliable thing in this world. How many emperors would dare to be at ease with the illusory hearts of the people unless they have a firm grasp of them?" "Yes, this subordinate understands." The young officer lowered his head. Ruhr stared at this subordinate for a moment. Then, his tone became gentler. "You are a recent graduate of the Imperial Military Academy. You are also outstanding in your studies. That mad dog Green recommended you to me before he left. He was not wrong in recommending you to me. You're a meticulous person, and you've learned military strategy quite well. You're a promising talent. I originally wanted to train you well, but I have a few words of warning for you today. You better remember them well. You better engrave them in your heart. Engrave them deep in your heart. Don't ever forget them. Remind yourself at all times." "My lord, please speak." Although Ruhr's tone was still calm, his eyes gradually became stern. "As a person, it is better to have a simple mind. Especially soldiers like us. Remember that your identity is a soldier, not a politician. Some things are for politicians to consider. As a soldier, you should not spend all your time analyzing and studying these things. You are indeed very smart. However, you must understand that when it comes to politics, the smarter you are, the faster you die. Since you are a soldier, you should abide by the duties of a soldier. To spend all your time studying these things, you are neither a soldier nor a politician. What is the difference between you and those warlords?" After saying that, his voice became stern. After being reprimanded by Ruhr for the last time, this young officer didn't show much fear on his face. He just bowed his head and saluted respectfully. He smiled calmly, but his eyes were still calm. He slowly said, "Yes, I will keep your words in mind and never forget them." Ruhr looked at the young man and the sharpness in his eyes slowly receded. Then, he smiled and said, "Let's go. Come with me to welcome back His Highness the Crown Prince. Today's battle is over. The rebel army will not be mobilizing again. Everyone, rest up for a bit. We will fight again another day." After saying that, the fatty urged his horse forward. However, after taking 2 steps, he suddenly turned back and smiled at the young officer. "Reinhardt, I remember that your name is a surname of the people from the south of the Empire. It's also called Lion's Heart, right?" When the young officer heard that, he was slightly startled. Then, he smiled and said, "Yes, my lord. I am from the south. I heard that 2 years ago, Cavashir was dragged by your dean to teach a class in a military academy. However, he stopped teaching after half a year. Is that true?" When Reinhardt heard that, a smile appeared on his face. However, he did not avoid Ruhr's gaze. His tone was very calm as he said, "That's right, my lord. I have also attended Mr. Cavashir's class. Mr. Cavashir is very knowledgeable. Many of the other students and I deeply respect him. Later, when I had some questions to ask Mr. Cavashir in private, Mr. Cavashir never put on any airs. He was gentle and friendly. I am grateful for Mr. Cavashir's teachings and treat him like a teacher." When Ruhr heard that, a look of, as expected, flashed across his eyes. At that moment, he did not say anything. He just chuckled and rode away slowly. Cavashir actually reached out to the Imperial Military Academy. This old thing, his hands are too long. In the rebel camp, Hughes had suffered a defeat today. Initially, he was full of anger. However, when he returned to the tent, the anger on his face had disappeared completely. Even Salvador saw this ability. He was both impressed and wary. When the other governors came to comfort him, Hughes laughed heartily and said, "You don't have to comfort me. I was a little angry at first. Now, I feel that I did not lose out at all. I used a few thousand people to find out the strength of the road-rear cavalry. This price is worth it." Then, Hughes said, "I have an idea. From tomorrow onwards, let the rear camp have different soldiers. Deliberately show weakness. It would be best if they make way and let the road-rear cavalry enter the city." Let the road-rear cavalry enter the city? It was already difficult enough to attack the city. If such a powerful force entered Osceola City, wouldn't it be even more? On the other hand, Salvador's eyes lit up when he heard that. He looked at Hughes and laughed. "Brilliant! Looking for recommendation votes. I really need recommendation vote. Everyone, please help." To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidien.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 286. GOR Chapter 272. Please fulfill my wish. The next day, his subordinate officer reported to Roer that the rebel army camp below Osceola City was completely silent. The rebel army had even abandoned two of their main camps to open up a path. It would appear that they did not intend to forcefully stop them. Instead, they had opened up a path for them to enter the city. When he heard that, Roer's pair of eyes bulged out. He quickly ran out and stood atop a high slope to observe the situation. It was as his subordinate had reported. The rebel army had given up two of their main camps to open up a path for them to enter the city. The opening in the sky above the battlefield, be it in terms of terrain or route, was extremely tempting. All he needed to do now was to nod his head and give the order. Then, his army could calmly cross the battlefield and enter Osceola City. Damn it, these fellows are really cunning. Roer rubbed his chin and muttered to himself. "General." Several of the generals beside him were unable to stop themselves from advising him. "This is a rare opportunity. Those rebel army must have been scared by our attacks yesterday. They do not dare to stop us. We can use this opportunity to charge into the city. We do not have enough supplies. As long as we can charge into the city, we can calmly engage in a protracted battle with these fellows. All of you, shut up." Roer sighed and turned to look at the generals behind him. Most of them were flag-bearers or deputies. Seeing that most of them wanted to use this opportunity to charge into the city, Roer could not help but feel disappointed. Sigh, it would appear that there is still a lack of insightful talents within his army. Suddenly, he caught sight of the young face standing in the corner of the tent. Yesterday, he had reprimanded this young fellow. However, this young fellow showed no signs of fear. At present, everyone within the tent was arguing while he stood quietly in the corner with a calm expression on his face. Roer's heart skipped a beat and he smiled. "Reinhardt, what do you think?" Before Roer opened his mouth, everyone was staring at him. However, the general suddenly opened his mouth and asked for Reinhardt's opinion first, which surprised all the generals in the tent. This Reinhardt was not an old subordinate that Roer had brought over from the 6th Corps. This young guy was a young student that Roer had brought over from the Imperial Military Academy before he was transferred to the position of General of the Road-Rear Cavalry Corps. However, Roer seemed to favor this young man and always brought him along with him. Even some important military affairs were discussed by this young man called Reinhardt. At this moment, the fatty didn't ask anyone else but Reinhardt. This made many of the old subordinates who had been following the fatty reveal surprise and dissatisfaction on their faces. Reinhardt's expression was calm. He was not handsome and his figure was not tall. It could even be said that he looked a little ugly. Moreover, his temperament was more of a scholarly and delicate style. Although he was wearing a military uniform, he looked more like a civilian official. On his young face, there was a faint furry beard at the corner of his mouth. There was also a hint of immaturity. Reinhardt was shrouded by everyone's gaze. After thinking for a while, he smiled. General, what's there to think about? Of course, we can't enter the city. As soon as he said this, the expressions of all the generals in the tent changed. Someone could not help but refute. Reinhardt, what nonsense are you talking about? We came thousands of miles to reinforce the imperial capital. Now that a great opportunity to enter the city is in front of us, how can we sit back and do nothing? Someone else hesitated. Reinhardt, are you worried that this is a trap set by the rebels to lure the enemy? We have studied the terrain carefully. The gap left behind is a flat land. The surrounding terrain is wide and flat. There is no way to set up an ambush. Besides, we are all mounted soldiers. If we charge forward, we will be able to enter the city in no time. The rebels will not be able to pull any trick. More people agreed with this statement. That is right, Reinhardt. Aren't you being too cautious? It is good to be careful. Reinhardt shook his head. I am not worried about an ambush by the rebels. I have also studied the terrain of the battlefield. This flat terrain can be seen clearly. There is no chance for an ambush. Then, what are you hesitating about? Reinhardt did not bother arguing with them. He simply looked at Ruhr and said, General, I still insist on not entering the city. Hearing that, some of them revealed looks of anger. Some of the more impatient ones rebuked him on the spot. Reinhardt, don't forget your own identity. Our entire army has already sworn an oath to serve our country with our lives. Why are you being so timid? Could it be that you have become timid? Besides, Ostjila is right before us. He is being besieged by the rebel army. We have a great opportunity to not enter the city. Could it be that you have second thoughts? Enough. All of you, shut up. Ruhr quickly stopped the argument. He glanced at the general who had rebuked Reinhardt and frowned. Be careful with your words. Reinhardt's loyalty is unquestionable. Naturally, he has his own concerns. None of us are selfish. We are all loyal to our country. Don't say such hurtful words in the future. After saying that, Ruhr waved his hand and said, All of you are dismissed. I will think about it again. Some of them tried to say something. Ruhr's face sank. Seeing the expression on Ruhr's face, those who had wanted to say something shut their mouth. Without saying a word, they walked out one after another. In the end, Ruhr opened his mouth and said, Reinhardt, you stay. The others looked at Reinhardt with complicated expressions. Then, one after another, they walked out of the tent. Reinhardt stood in front of Ruhr. When all the generals in the tent had left, a bitter smile appeared on his young face. Your Excellency, that was a good move. Ruhr pretended to be at a loss. What did you say? Reinhardt's smile grew even more wry. Sir, you already have the idea that we cannot enter the city. However, you did not want to say it out loud. So, you borrowed my mouth to say it to the generals in the army. Isn't that right? Sigh, you really think highly of me. You let me take on this role of offending others. A smile finally appeared on Ruhr's face. He looked at Reinhardt and said, Oh, how do you know that I do not want to enter the city? That's obvious. Reinhardt shook his head. You are not a fool. However, Hughes and Salvatore in the rebel army are not fools either. In this battle, we all know very well that our chances of winning are too low. Salvatore and Hughes have deliberately opened up a path for us to enter the city. They simply do not have good intentions. The smile in Ruhr's eyes grew. Tell me what you think. That is obvious, Reinhardt said. Hughes and Salvatore are ambitious. Both of them are the best among the many warlord governors. They also have great foresight. Although the battle is currently in a stalemate, they have already begun to plan for what to do after the battle. Our Rodrier cavalry is a thorn in the rebel army's heart. They must get rid of it as soon as possible. It is not difficult for them to win this battle. However, it is difficult for them to defeat all of the Empire's main forces in one fell swoop in Ostjila. That way they can conquer the world in one battle. Only by doing so can they maximize the benefits of this battle. After a pause, Reinhardt swallowed his saliva. His mouth and tongue were somewhat dry. Roar noticed this and gave a faint smile. He grabbed his own water bag and tossed it over. Reinhardt did not hold back. He opened it and gulped down 2 mouthfuls. His eyes immediately lit up. Good wine. Shut up. Alcohol is prohibited in the army. Don't leak this information to me. Roar deliberately put on a stern face. Reinhardt gulped down 2 more mouthfuls before letting out a satisfied sigh. Then, he continued. As I said earlier, our army cannot win this battle. You are clear on this point. Naturally, Hughes and Salvatore are not confused as well. Thus, their goal is not only to win, but also to win thoroughly. It would be best if they can completely eliminate the Roadrear cavalry that poses the greatest threat to them in this battle. That way, they can avoid future troubles. Reinhardt looked into Roar's eyes and continued. The 13th Corps is an all-cavalry division. It is also the strongest frontal assault force within the Empire's army. If they want to defeat the Roadrear cavalry in a field battle, in my opinion, there is not a single army within the Empire that has the strength to do so. Given the combat prowess of the Roadrear cavalry, in a field battle, even if they were to face an enemy 4 to 5 times their number, they would have nothing to fear. Besides, we are cavalry. Even if the enemy can defeat us, we can still make use of the mobility of our cavalry to retreat. It may be possible for them to defeat us, but for them to completely devour us, that is too difficult. Thus, they came up with this method of loosening the tight bag and waiting for us to dive in. As Reinhardt spoke, he gradually became excited. He simply picked up a pen holder and military book from Roar's table and began to imitate the terrain. The combat prowess of the cavalry lies in the field battle, not in defending the city. If we were to charge into the city, it would naturally not be difficult. However, after entering the city, our cavalry's combat prowess in the field is instead restricted. If the cavalry that cannot fight in the field were to all go up the city walls to defend the city, then the Roadrear cavalry would not be as useful as an ordinary infantry. After all, our soldiers are used to fighting on horseback. Secondly, although in general, it is not that the cavalry cannot be used in defending the city. For example, in some tactics, during the gap between the enemy's siege, the cavalry of the defending army can suddenly open the city walls to launch a counterattack. However, these tactics can be used in other places, but in Osgilla they cannot be used. He pointed at the terrain laid out on the table and smiled bitterly. My lord, although this Osgilla is the most majestic city in the continent and has the strongest defensive wall system in the continent, I have to say, when it was first designed and built, the biggest flaw left behind is, this place is simply a place of death for cavalry. Once any cavalry enters the city, it is the same as cutting off the legs of their own horses. Reinhardt sighed and smiled bitterly. Below the city walls of Osgilla is a great river. This great river is formed by opening up the estuary and bringing in seawater. This great river acts as the moat of Osgilla. When resisting the enemy's siege, it will cause a huge problem for the enemy. Because such a wide moat cannot be filled with manpower. However, it is precisely this moat that limits the effectiveness of the cavalry in the city. There are several bridges connecting the two, but the narrowest part of this great river is still tens of meters wide. In other words, if the cavalry of the defending army wants to go out of the city to launch a counterattack, they are simply courting death. When a large group of cavalry goes out of the city to fight, they first have to cross the bridge on the river. The tens of meters long bridge is only tens of meters wide. Just think about it, when the cavalry of the city wants to go out of the city to launch a counterattack, a large group of cavalry will crowd on the bridge to cross the river. This is not an ordinary moat of a city. This is a distance of tens of meters. If a large group of cavalry crowded on the bridge, they are simply courting death. If the enemy's general has a little bit of brain, he can just send a group of heavy infantry to form a tight formation at one end of the bridge and use a small number of sacrifices to buy time for the cavalry to rush out of the city to stop on the bridge. Then, the archers at the back will shoot. On the narrow bridge, there is no need to aim. As long as the archers shoot, our cavalry will face a massacre. That's right. What else? Roar sneered. Once we enter the city, we can forget about coming out again. Moreover, after entering the city, we can only dismount from our horses and go up the city walls to act as infantry. Our combat strength will be reduced by more than half. More importantly, we have over 30,000 war horses. Over 30,000. The amount of fodder a horse needs to eat every day is not a small amount. Once we enter the city, over 20,000 soldiers and over 30,000 war horses will greatly increase the consumption of the stored fodder in the city. If I were the enemy's general, I would not even need to siege the city. Just use the heavy infantry to strengthen the crossbows and block the bridge out of the city. In addition to the blockade on the sea, after 2 months, the people in the city will starve to death. Well said. Roar took a deep breath. However, his expression grew more solemn. He stared at Reinhardt for a while before gently shaking his head. There was a look of regret on his face as he said, "Then, in your opinion, what should we do?" Reinhardt smiled again. He looked at Roar and bowed. Then, he said coolly, "General, you already have an idea in mind. Why ask me?" Roar's voice was vague as he said, It is never a bad thing to listen to other opinions." Reinhardt narrowed his eyes and stared at Roar. After a while, he finally made up his mind and said, "Sir, do you really want to hear it?" "Of course." "Then, I beg you for one thing." There was a cold expression on Reinhardt's face as he said, "No matter what I say after you hear it, you must not punish me for my words." "All right." Reinhardt appeared to be relieved. He snorted and there was a trace of disdain in his laughter as he said, "The way I see it, in this situation, you have 3 choices. The first is to immediately lead the army and leave this place. Because, in my opinion, your decision to lead the army to reinforce Ostjilla is an unwise one. I am not asking you to run away. Instead, I want you to lead the army up north. At present, most of the rebel army in the north has been mobilized and gathered before the walls of Ostjilla. However, the rebel army areas in the north are empty. You can lead the army up north to attack the base of the rebel army. As long as you can seize the opportunity to attack 1 or 2 of the rebel army areas, the rebel army in the front line will naturally fall into chaos. Although these fellows are still quite united at present, once their foundation is threatened, it is hard to say if they will continue to stay here. After all, everyone has their own selfish motives. The second choice is to continue the stalemate with the enemy outside the city. Once the situation changes, if the Empire wins, we will pursue the rebel army. If the rebel army wins, we will immediately lead the army down south. Although the rebel army has many soldiers, they will not be able to stop our cavalry. There are still many counties in the south that are under the control of the Empire. When the time comes, we will crown His Highness, the Crown Prince, as the new Emperor. Then, we will order the counties in the south to mobilize their forces and reorganize the army to continue the stalemate with the rebel army. As for the third choice, humph, naturally you will lead the army into the city and wait for the day when the city is breached. Then, you will die for the Empire in a spectacular manner. You will be considered to have obtained what you asked for. The history books will definitely record your splendid deeds, however. Forgive this subordinate for being presumptuous. Based on the general's way of doing things, this subordinate is afraid that you will not choose the third choice." After saying all that, Reinhardt looked at Roar with bright eyes. Roar narrowed his eyes. It was as though he had been weighing the pros and cons in his mind for a long time. However, He did not immediately say anything. Instead, he stared at Reinhardt from head to toe. Only when his stare caused Reinhardt to feel uneasy did he retract his gaze. A pity, truly a pity. Ruhr smacked his lips and sighed. Reinhardt smiled and said, "General, are you feeling pity for me?" "How do you know that I am feeling pity for you?" Reinhardt shook his head and said, "Ever since I said those words yesterday, the general has begun to suspect me. How can I not understand? Especially when I said that I was once taught by Lord Cavalier, your expression became a little unfriendly, he." As he said that, Reinhardt's tone became a little gloomy. He smiled bitterly and said, "Just now in the tent, you asked me to say in front of all the generals that I was not allowed to enter the city. On one hand, you wanted to use me as a tool. On the other hand, your intention— do you dare to say that you did not intentionally let me offend all the generals and make all the generals in the army dislike me?" Ruhr nodded slowly and said, "All right, I admit it. I did it on purpose. I have indeed begun to suspect you. This is true. I will not hide it from you. Not for anything else, but for that fellow Cavalier. You are that person's disciple, so I am very worried about you." "Humph. I understand. Since you suspect me, you will naturally not dare to put me in an important position in the future. Today, you took the opportunity to make me say these offensive words to make all the generals in the army dislike me. In the future, even if I want to do something, no one in the army will like me except for you. Naturally, I will not be able to make any big waves, right?" "You are very smart. Not just ordinarily smart." Ruhr laughed and said, "That is why I am so regretful. I do not dare to use a talent like you. Sigh, Cavalier's hands have actually reached into the Imperial Military Academy. How can I not worry?" Reinhardt smiled and took out a piece of paper from his chest. He gently placed it in front of Ruhr. "What is it?" "My resignation." Reinhardt shook his head and said, "From what you said yesterday, I already understood that you will not put me in an important position. Instead of being suspected by you and continuing to stay here, it is better for me to go somewhere else and fulfill my ambitions." "You have already made preparations." Ruhr laughed and looked at the resignation in front of him and said, "You are not worried that I will kill you?" "I will not join the rebel army." "Why would you kill me?" Reinhardt said calmly, "I originally thought that in the Imperial military, General Ruhr, you do not adhere to the pedantic rules. Someone like me might have a chance to show what I have learned under you. I did not expect you to be so wary of Mr. Cavalier's disciple. If that is the case, where do you plan to go? When Master Green recommended me to you, didn't he say that if you don't need me here, I can go to the north to join him? I heard that the military commander Shea Thunder is also a guy who does things unexpectedly. Maybe he will be more to my liking." Reinhardt looked into Ruhr's eyes and said, "I ask for your permission, General. The city of Meta has been broken. Odin left only 3,000 men to guard the city. The main force continued south." Green stood in front of Shea with a dignified look. Shea was also surprised. "Manninger got food supplies and did not turn back to deal with us?" Green smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid we have to thank Lord Crincia. Before the governor died for his country, he ordered the granaries in the city to be burned. Although Manninger took over the city of Meta, he did not get too much food supplies. There is still the 7th Division in the south. He did not dare to waste time to turn back to deal with us. Instead, he must take advantage of the fact that the provisions are still barely enough to get rid of the 7th Division, which is the biggest threat to him. Because for him, we are only a small force of 1,000 men here. It is far less important than the 7th Division." Shea's eyes suddenly lit up. "There are only 3,000 Odin in the city of Meta now. Maybe we can. You want to sneak attack Meta?" Green immediately shook his head. "It's impossible. This is news from 4 days ago. We have too few troops and I dare not send too many scouts, so as not to waste the troops. Therefore, the news came a little too late. Maybe Manninger has already defeated the 7th Division and returned to his division. Also, it is too risky. If we fail to sneak attack, it will be too dangerous for us to be entangled in the wilderness. Besides, even if we take over Meta, it has just gone through a big battle. The city walls are damaged in many places, and we don't have enough military equipment. If we take over, we won't be able to defend. While the two of them were discussing, they suddenly heard hurried footsteps outside. Ka-Tua quickly rushed in, and before he entered the hall, he loudly shouted, "Shea! My lord! A messenger from our army has come. It is the 7th Division." The 7th Division? When Shea and Green heard this, they jumped up almost at the same time. "Please vote, please vote, please vote, the vote does not cost money. Everyone, please spend a few seconds to vote," to be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 287. GOR Chapter 273. What I Do Best. Shea and Green exchanged glances and caught the hint of a smile in each other's eyes. The two of them had the same thought in their minds: what we want comes true. They immediately had Ka-Tua go out and call them in. Shea smiled at Green and said, "Say, why do you think the 7th Corps would send someone here?" Green shook his head, but his expression was not relaxed. "They are most likely here to ask for help. But we can't even take care of ourselves right now, I'm afraid." Before he could finish his words, Ka-Tua had already led a man into the room. The man behind Ka-Tua had a burly figure and brown hair. His upper body was covered in a patterned armor that was given to middle to low-ranking officers in the Imperial Army. A sword hung from his waist. However, his body was covered in stains and his hair was somewhat messy. His face was covered in dust and he cut a sorry figure. This man's appearance was not outstanding. However, he had a very eye-catching aquiline nose. He strode in and was about to salute when he suddenly caught sight of Shea. He was stunned and his mouth involuntarily let out a cry of surprise. When Shea saw this man, he was also stunned. Then, a strange expression appeared on his face. The aquiline-nosed man stood there and looked at Shea with an awkward expression. There was even a trace of panic on his face. It was as though he was at a loss of what to do. For a moment, he even forgot to salute. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. Then, a strange smile slowly appeared on Shea's face. He deliberately used a surprised tone and said, "Eh? And here I was wondering who it was. So it's you? Jelunxier, aren't you in the 6th Corps with that aquiline nose of yours? When did you run off to the 7th Corps?" When the guy called Jelunxier heard this, although his face was full of dust, his face turned red. For a moment, he looked at Shea and stammered, but couldn't say a word. Seeing the two of them, Green knew that there was something going on. He did not say anything and just stood there with a smile on his face. After a while, the man named Jelunxier finally sighed. He slapped his thigh and smiled bitterly. "Unlucky, unlucky! Consider me unlucky. I never expected that the commander of the garrison forces of Denzel City would be you," Shea thundered. "Sigh. What's going on?" Shea shook his head. "Why did you call yourself the envoy of the 7th Army?" As he spoke, he walked over and sat Jelunxier down on a chair. He even personally threw a water bag over. "Drink some water first, then tell me slowly." Jelunxier didn't drink the water either. Instead, he grabbed Shea's arm and said seriously, "Since I've met you, I won't hide it anymore. Shea, please save our brothers from the 6th Corps." Then, Jelunxier's words made both Shea and Green fall into silence. This Glenshire was indeed a member of the 6th Corps, not the 7th Corps. His acquaintance with Shea originated from the battle with Odin's men on the Wildfire Plains. Back then, the 6th Corps had joined forces with the Roadrear Cavalry Corps. At that time, Shea's performance in that battle was outstanding, especially in the last battle, where he led more than 200 cavalrymen of various brands to charge into the enemy's formation and rescued the large army that had broken into the camp. His brave and fierce performance won the praise of the entire army. Back then, this hawk-nosed Gelunxier was a battalion officer in the logistics department of the 6th Corps. He had interacted with Shea a few times before. This fellow had a humorous and straightforward personality, which suited Shea's temperament very well. The two of them were more or less birds of a feather, and could be considered to have formed a friendship. Unexpectedly, they would meet here in Denzel City. As for Gelunxier's false claim of being the envoy of the 7th Corps, there was a reason behind it. As everyone knew, the former general of the 6th Corps was the famous General Rabbit Roar. However, this fame was more of a form of ridicule. For most of the people in the Empire, General Roar's fame was more of a negative connotation. A general who was best at running away naturally could not become the idol of the Empire like a Drake. Because of this, the true strength of the 6th Corps had been greatly underestimated for many years. In the eyes of most people, a general was best at running away. That meant that this army, other than running away, would have no other abilities. Roar had won the hearts of the soldiers when he was in the 6th Corps. No matter how outsiders saw it, most of the soldiers in the army had a very simple understanding. As long as a general treated the soldiers as human beings, they would not treat the lives of the soldiers as expendable goods. Following such a leader, their chances of survival were much higher than other units. That was enough. Despite the Roadrear Cavalry Corps' impressive reputation, who would have noticed that the Roadrear Cavalry Corps' casualty rate had always been the highest among all the armies in the Empire? Not everyone was a war maniac, and not all soldiers were unafraid of death. So what if their reputation was bad? Surviving was the most important thing. However, the problem was that, after the war with Odin last year, the upper echelons of the Empire's army changed. After Adrik stepped down as the general of the Roadrear Cavalry Corps, the old emperor made a decision that was out of everyone's expectations. The Rabbit General Roar would take over as the general of the Roadrear Cavalry Corps, letting a famous rabbit lead a group of the Empire's strongest lions. In the end, after Roar took over, he did quite well. This, including the old emperor, Adrik, Shea and the others, did not find it strange. Roar was not the trash who only knew how to run away in the eyes of the common people. This cunning fatso was actually a general who hid his strength well. After the Roadrear Cavalry Corps sent away the valiant General Adrik, they received a new leader who was equally outstanding. However, Roar's old army, the 6th Corps, was forgotten. If Roar himself was the most underestimated general in the Empire, then the 6th Corps was the most underestimated army in terms of fighting strength. Shea was well aware of this. Disregarding everything else, during the war with Odin, the Roadrear Cavalry Corps and the 6th Corps had retreated from the Wildfire Plains, Albacete Plains. During that retreat, the 6th Corps had displayed their valiant quality. During that retreat, Odin's men were hot on their heels. The army had to rush through hundreds of li. Even a number of the Roadrear Cavalry Corps were unable to endure such an intense pursuit. However, the 6th Corps was able to endure it. Do not forget, the Roadrear Cavalry Corps were running on four-legged warhorses, while the men of the 6th Corps were running on two-legged warhorses. Running on two-legged and four-legged horses together, in the end, not a single member of the 6th Corps was left behind. Even after the battle with Hastings's main camp, the losses suffered by the 6th Corps were far less than the losses suffered by the Roadrear Cavalry Corps. This army that was considered to only know how to run away, its quality was clear to see. However, the problem was, after Roar left his post, the 6th Corps was almost forgotten by the Empire. This underestimated army was given the cold shoulder. The Sixth Corps was never the trump card of the Empire like the Roadrear Cavalry Corps. Its reputation was not that good either. After Ruhr, the only backbone of the army, stepped down, the army had almost fallen to the point where no one cared about it and no one cared about it. Firstly, their combat power was weakened. When Ruhr left his post, he took away some of his old subordinates who had followed him for many years. These were the most experienced elites in the army. Ruhr took away a group of officers from the Sixth Corps. Out of 2 emblem regiments and 8 battalions, Ruhr took away 10 mid-level and low-level elites in the army. During the reconstruction of the various armies after the war, the Sixth Corps suffered the greatest loss. Ruhr went to the Roadrear Cavalry Corps to take up his post. Through some means, he transferred an emblem regiment of his old subordinates from the Sixth Corps. Emperor Cantos also ordered the transfer of 2 emblem regiments from the Sixth Corps. One of them was added to the city guards in the imperial capital, while the other was added to the 2nd and 9th Corps that were rebuilt after the war. With this, the Sixth Corps lost half of its men. It was a pity that this army did not suffer any major losses during the war. However, during the reconstruction after the war, half of its men were gone in an instant. Moreover, the ones who were transferred away were the main elite. As a result, the Sixth Army's framework fell apart. Gelunxier was originally a logistics battalion officer in the Sixth Corps. He was not part of Ruhr's old army and was not considered a direct subordinate. Therefore, he was not part of the direct subordinates that Ruhr took away. When the old emperor ordered the transfer of the elite troops from the Sixth Corps to other places, he was not part of it either. This guy stayed in the Sixth Corps. However, because the Sixth Corps was too heavily mobilized, there was a shortage of manpower. As a logistics battalion officer, he was promoted from a logistics auxiliary soldier to the main battle force. His rank was also promoted from battalion officer to deputy emblem regimental officer. Now, he was the deputy flag bearer of an emblem regiment in the Sixth Corps. The Sixth Corps was heavily mobilized. The remaining veterans were less than half of their former numbers, and they were the weaker half. Following which, the entire army was ordered to set up camp in a small county called Notz County in the northwest of the empire. It was not until 3 months ago that the upper echelons of the empire seemed to have finally remembered this almost disorganized army. A few orders were issued. First, a new general was appointed. As an army that had always been loyal to the royal family, the Sixth Corps was still under the control of the royal family even though it was known to be weak. However, the strange thing was that this new general was not a traditional general from the Eagle Department. He was not even a traditional soldier who graduated from the Imperial Military Academy. This new general was 40 years old. He was born into a noble family and even had the title of a viscount. Following which, the order for reorganization was also issued. The Sixth Corps would transfer troops from the local garrison troops in Notz County and the 2 neighboring counties to replenish their manpower. One had to know that the local garrison troops were originally disorganized. On paper, there were 3 emblem regiments of the local garrison troops in the 3 counties that were ordered to replenish their manpower. However, in reality, the number of people, fortunately, the upper echelons understood the situation and added an order to allow the Sixth Corps to recruit soldiers on the spot. They even allocated a sum of military funds. But the problem was, the newly appointed general of the army was a complete mediocre person. This new general was a complete aristocrat. After taking up the position, he did not have any intention to reorganize the army. He probably also understood that the upper echelons did not have much hope for this army's combat power. Moreover, this aristocrat was appointed as the general of the Sixth Corps. This was most likely the result of a compromise between the Eagle Department and the aristocrat. It was not surprising. Even though they were both royalists, The Eagle Department and the aristocrats were not on good terms. Although the royal family relied heavily on the Eagle Department, the emperor might not be at ease if he handed over all his loyal troops to the Eagle Department. Therefore, the aristocrats had to have some power in order to better balance the power of the Eagle Department. After this aristocrat took up the position, he did not behave like a general at all. This old man liked to enjoy life. After taking up the position for 2 months, he stayed in the county capital for 1.5 months. He did not care about most of the military matters. As for the sum of military funds allocated by the upper echelons to recruit new soldiers, this old man did not hesitate to embezzle a small part of it. For the past 2 months, he had been fooling around in the brothels in the capital city. He did not handle any military matters in the past 2 months, but he had 3 or 4 lovers. With this delay, the 6th Corps was still the same as before. They had only transferred 300 to 500 old and weak soldiers from the local garrison, which was barely enough to fill up an auxiliary camp. The true foundation of the 6th Army was only left with 3 emblem groups, and less than 10,000 people. In these few months, the morale of the 6th Corps had been broken. Fortunately, a few old men at the emblem group level managed to maintain the situation and maintained normal training. However, the military strength could not be replenished. Naturally, it could not be said that they had recovered to their pre-war standard. However, this was not the worst. A few days ago, the situation in the empire suddenly changed. The royal family and the warlords broke off and a civil war began. The 6th Corps immediately fell into an awkward situation. They had received the order from the imperial capital to summon all the troops to the imperial capital to rescue the emperor. However, the problem was that the 6th Corps could not mobilize to rescue the emperor. Because the upper echelons of the empire did not like them, the 6th Corps was stationed in a small county near the border in the northwest of the empire. The journey from there to the imperial capital Australia was thousands of miles, and they had to pass through 4 military regions of the warlord party. With less than 10,000 soldiers in the 6th Corps, it was simply courting death if they wanted to travel thousands of miles and pass through 4 military regions. The most infuriating thing was that when the situation was urgent and the army sent people to the capital city to look for the new general to return to the camp to take charge of the situation, the new aristocratic general had already packed up his belongings and ran away with a few of his lovers a day before. Now that there was no general in the army, a few old men at the emblem group level sat down and discussed. They all agreed that it was basically impossible to mobilize to rescue the emperor from the imperial capital. Everyone discussed and came up with an idea. On the surface, they would respond to the imperial capital's order, but the entire army would continue to stay put and reorganize. But this was not the end. After a few days, another disaster came knocking on their door. The war god Odin and Hastings's Black Flag Army suddenly attacked from the north. The Black Flag Army didn't take the Albacete Plains this time. Instead, they took a detour through the Red Wilderness and went south along the northwest. The first place to bear the brunt of their attack was Notts County. After receiving the military report, the few leading officers of the 6th Corps were all dumbfounded. How powerful was Hastings's Black Flag Army? Even during normal times, only the Rhodria cavalry was publicly acknowledged within the empire to be able to go toe-to-toe with the Black Flag Army. Even when the 6th Corps' strength was at its peak, when the wise General Rohr was leading the troops, he didn't dare to face the Black Flag Army head-on. He could only rely on trickery to escape from Hastings's hands. Let alone now? The 6th Corps only had half of its military strength left. The commander of the troops had fled at the last moment. The morale of the troops was in a mess. There was no hope that they could resist the Black Flag Army. Originally, everyone had planned to retreat to the capital city of Notts County and resist. But in the end, bad news came once again. When the governor of Notts County saw the ferocious momentum of Odin and Hastings' Black Flag Army, he directly surrendered. This time, the Sixth Corps could be considered to have fallen into a desperate situation. They definitely couldn't win in a field battle. As for a city defense battle, the city had already surrendered. They were a lone army. No matter how they looked at it, only death awaited them. What was even more infuriating was that Hastings received news that the Empire's army stationed in Notts County was actually his old enemy, the Sixth Corps. Hastings had a great reputation. Back then, he was played by Roer and deeply felt that it was the greatest humiliation of his life. Now that he had the opportunity, he didn't even send troops to receive the surrendered cities. Instead, he immediately led the Black Flag Army and aggressively charged towards the Sixth Corps' encampment. At this moment of life and death crisis, the remaining few old men of the Sixth Corps discussed and decided to use the glorious tradition left behind by the previous General Roer. Since we can't win, then let's King run. Facing the Black Flag Army head-on was something that the current Sixth Corps couldn't do. Not to mention now, they couldn't do it back then either. Once they talked about running away, the confused hearts of the Sixth Corps' soldiers immediately brightened up after hearing Wu Rant's words. It was as if the clouds had cleared and the sun had appeared. All of a sudden, their confused hearts were suddenly enlightened. Run away? *CK. We are the best at this. Although according to the Empire's military law, the garrison had the responsibility to defend the land. If they ran away before the battle, they would receive the death penalty. But it wasn't that the brothers of the Sixth Corps were afraid of death. Everyone wanted to resist and even planned to defend the city to the death. But the problem was that the governor of Notts County had already surrendered and sold the city to Odin's people. Now, the Sixth Corps didn't even have a place to stand. How could they fight? In this situation, rather than throwing away their lives, it was better to preserve their strength and wait for the future. What else was there to think about? Run my *SS. Requesting recommendation votes for support, to be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 288. GOR Chapter 274. Strong guest, weak main, then let's run. The few old officers left behind to guard the area made their decision. Then let's run. All of the Sixth Corps' officers and soldiers shouted the same thing. Once they began to plan their escape, the Sixth Corps' officers and soldiers were suddenly inspired. Which ones were organizing the supplies, which ones were going to take a roundabout route, which ones were going to cover the rear, which ones were going to set up a deceptive formation, everything was in perfect order. As a result, Hastings once again got a taste of the Sixth Corps' ability to escape. When the Black Flag Army charged into the Sixth Corps' encampment, they only managed to occupy a nearly empty camp. Then, history once again proved a truth. When a group is of one mind, the energy that can erupt out is valiant, great, astonishing, and miraculous. During their pursuit, the Sixth Corps first made use of a small river and used the discarded supplies and military equipment to create a dam. When the Black Flag Army's vanguard arrived, they saw hundreds of Sixth Corps soldiers lazily sitting on the riverbank, basking in the sun. Their flags and weapons were scattered all over the ground. Faced with such a situation, the Black Flag Army's vanguard was bewildered and did not dare to advance. They quickly sent someone to report back to Hastings, asking for orders. The experienced Hastings sneered. "Humph, you want to attack us when we are crossing the river?" He then ordered the vanguard not to advance recklessly and to confront the Sixth Corps across the river. That night, the Sixth Corps dug the dam upstream and used the river water to wash away the water, creating a vast ocean downstream. The muddy riverbank blocked the Black Flag Army's pursuers and the Sixth Corps swaggered away. Hastings was furious. He personally led 3,000 mounted soldiers in pursuit. In the end, they followed the 6th Corps into a valley. They picked up countless flags and weapons in the valley, thinking that the 6th Corps had lost their courage and abandoned their armor. But in the end, the 6th Corps made use of their familiarity with the terrain to lead the Black Flag Army around the mountains for 3 days. In the end, after the 6th Corps ran out of the mountains, the lost Black Flag Army had to wander around the mountains for 2 more days before running out. Fortunately, Hastings quickly came to his senses and ordered the old horse in the army to lead the way. Only then were they able to walk out of the mountain. However, after leaving the mountains, Hastings received even more shocking news. These guys from the 6th Corps didn't run away. Instead, they turned around and headed south towards the capital of Notts County. Taking advantage of the fact that Hastings had not returned in time, they took down the capital of Notts County and killed the county governor who had surrendered. They looted all the horses, and carts in the city, and even set fire to the city walls before leaving. When Hastings arrived with his troops, he was left with a dilapidated city defense and a warehouse that had been reduced to ashes. Even if he wanted to give chase, the 6th Corps had obtained a large number of horses, and carts. In terms of mobility, they had reached a whole new level. It was even more difficult to catch up with this army that was good at running away. The 6th Corps finally charged out of Notts County. The army headed east, and even more nimbly split into 3 groups. They avoided the Black Flag Army's pursuit and forcefully ran out of Notts County. After that, they fully displayed the 6th Division's ability in rapid marching, and in just 3 days, they had covered more than 400 miles, and had already entered Moore Prefecture yesterday. Now that they knew that the Moore County garrison had not fallen, the leaders of the 6th Corps had a discussion and sent Jolunxier to contact them. We know that escaping at the last minute is a violation of military law. Although we have our difficulties, I'm afraid that others won't think the same. Now that we have run out of food and fodder, our soldiers are tired and our savings have been replenished. After thinking about it, we can only come to Denzel City to try our luck. We can only hide our identity and lie that we are from the 7th Corps, sigh. I didn't expect that the Denzel City garrison would be you, Sir Shea. After Jolunxier finished speaking, he looked at Shea eagerly. Sir, on account of our past friendship, please be magnanimous. Our brothers from the 6th Corps are not afraid of death. It's just that we know that we are going to die, so we might as well stay alive. When Shea heard this, he could no longer hide the joy on his face. He glanced at Green and saw that Green had the same reaction as him. He swallowed and said, Where is your main force now? How many people are left? They are 1 day's journey away from Denzel City. There are more than 8,600 men in the army. However, there are only 400 horses and 200 carts left. Jolunxier said helplessly. We ran too fast and the horses are too worn out. Along the way, we did not have any food to replenish our supplies. We could only kill the horses to replenish our supplies. The carts are also badly damaged, everyone can no longer run. If we don't get a chance to catch our breath, I'm afraid we won't be able to hold on any longer. Looking at the frowning Jolunxier, Shea and Green looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Shea hugged Jolunxier and patted him hard on the back. He said loudly, Don't worry. I will take in all of you from the 6th Corps. I have food and drink here. Although Denzel City is not big, its defenses are strong and we have sufficient military equipment. It is enough to deal with Odin's people. Hearing this, Jolunxier was overjoyed. However, his face immediately changed. But we still lost Notts County. The responsibility of losing our land and the crime of desertion, Green smiled and said, This is simple. Shea is the military officer of Moore County. According to the Empire's military law, the military officer of the county can act according to the circumstances. Have Shea write an official document stating that the governor of Notts County has defected to the enemy. Odin has too many men and requests that the 6th Corps withdraw to Moore County to assist in the defense. With this, we can explain it to the higher-up. Shea smiled and said, That's right, that's right. Lao Tzu is the military officer of the county. He can write whatever he wants in the document. However, the smile on Green's face faded. He said in a low voice, Besides, it doesn't matter whether this document is written or not. After this war, whether or not the Empire can continue to exist is still a question. When the time comes, no one will hold you accountable. Although he said this, in order to appease the soldiers of the 6th Corps, the document still had to be written. Shea immediately asked Green to write a document. After he signed it, he asked Green to personally go to the 6th Corps with Gelunxier to receive them and bring them back to Denzel City. Green was quite famous in the Empire's military. With his appearance, the soldiers of the 6th Corps would not have too many doubts. After Green left, Shea was in a good mood. He originally only had a few hundred old and weak men under his command. However, with the defection of the internal troops and the addition of the 6th Corps, his military strength had increased to more than 10,000. Moreover, the 2,000 mounted bandits in the internal troops were elite cavalry. The 6th Corps was the real central standing army of the Empire. It was an army that had been trained by the Ruhr for many years. The quality of the army was far better than that of ordinary local garrison troops. At this moment, Denzel City was well equipped with military equipment and food. With tens of thousands of soldiers and a famous general like Green as the commander, Shea was confident that he could hold the city for a year and a half even if there were enemies several times more attacking the city. After Green left, the garrison in the city began to move quickly. Shea appointed Ka Tuah, a former smuggler in the Rodrian cavalry, as the chief quartermaster. Sharba was sent to reorganize the mounted bandit. Although the mounted bandits were all elites, Sharba was an elite of the Rodrian cavalry. He should be able to keep them in check. All the big and small affairs in the city were put on Shea. He had never been an official of the Empire before. With so many things pressing down at once, it was inevitable that he would be a little flustered. The military affairs of the city, the control of the supplies in the city, there were dozens of big and small matters that he had to decide every day. Fortunately, he had Philip under him. After all, he used to be the leader of the Grand Warriors and had some experience as a leader. He barely managed to stabilize the situation. In addition, Shea also selected 100 mounted bandits to act as scouts. They were to patrol around Denzel City to gather information about the enemy. The range of the scouts was expanded to 50 miles. With these scouts as the eyes and ears, news from the outside quickly came back. After Manning's Scarlet Snow Army captured Mesta City, Manning left 5,000 men behind to guard Mesta City as he did not receive sufficient supplies. Then, he continued to lead his army south. The main force had already left Moore County and headed all the way south. They entered the neighboring counties in the south, and their vanguard was the 7th Army stationed there. At the same time, the two rebel armies of the Tima military district in the south had also begun to move towards the 7th Corps. The 7th Corps was faced with the predicament of being surrounded. Shea prayed every day that the 7th Corps could hold on for a few more days so that he could have more time to breathe. During this time, Philip found an opportunity to have a deep conversation with Shea in private. Philip was quite worried about the current situation on his side. He said that there was no way out if they were to defend Denzel City to the death. This was because there were no allies around at the moment. As far as the eye could see, it was all under the influence of Odin and the rebel army. The small Moore County was like a small boat in the vast ocean. According to Philip's idea, it was better to reorganize the army and follow the example of the 6th Corps abandoning Knott's County. They would lead the army south and take a detour to the southwest. They would then move towards Osgilla. As long as they could meet up with the Empire's army, their momentum would be greatly boosted and there might be hope. Shea was tempted by this idea for a while. However, he quickly dismissed the idea. Let's not talk about the long journey south. With our small number of troops, we might not be able to break through the encirclement and successfully reach Osgilla to meet up with the Empire's central army. Even if we can reach Osgilla, will we be safe? Although Osgilla has gathered the majority of the Empire's military strength, they are still at a disadvantage. Or to put it this way, Osgilla's situation is not much different from our Denzel City's situation. In fact, it might even be worse. You said that our Denzel City is like a small boat in the middle of a vast ocean. There are enemies in front, left, and right. But isn't Osgilla the same? Right now, Osgilla is also a boat in the middle of a vast ocean. The only difference is that this boat is slightly bigger. However, the pressure they are facing right now is 10 times or even 100 times greater than ours. After saying that, Shea looked at Philip and continued, "Let me tell you something from the bottom of my heart. The reason we are able to survive is because Osgilla is still holding on. Osgilla has attracted all of the rebel army's attention. Once Osgilla falls, we will no longer be able to affect the overall situation. When that happens, everyone will scatter and go home to farm." Hearing that, Philip pondered for a moment before asking Shea, "Sir, do you think Osgilla can hold on?" Hearing this, Shea chuckled a few times but didn't answer the question. Instead, he looked out of the window and gazed towards the south. He leisurely said, "I'm not concerned about this issue. I'm more concerned about the life and death of a certain guy. If that fellow is still alive, we might be able to turn this situation around." Philip opened his mouth. Naturally, he did not know who that fellow that Shea was talking about was. However, Shea's face turned serious and he said, "I do have something that I need you to do. This is a very dangerous matter. Additionally, the responsibility is heavy. Truth be told, I did not want to send you. However, I do not have many subordinates under me right now. You are the only one who is brave, meticulous, and skilled." Philip's eyes immediately lit up and he said, "Sir, please tell me. I need you to go to Osgilla." Shea said in a hushed tone, "The rebel army and the Imperial army are having a decisive battle in the Imperial capital. Thus, the Central Regular Army must have rushed to the Imperial capital to save the Emperor. At this moment, the Roadrear cavalry must also be in Osgilla. I heard that the Crown Prince had long since been sent to the Roadrear cavalry. I believe that is the old Emperor's backup plan. As for you, I want you to charge through the heavy enemy lines and kill your way into the city. You do not have the ability to do so. However, as far as I was concerned, Roer was extremely cunning. He would never bring his troops into the city. Most likely, he would station his entire army outside the city so that they could coordinate with the defenders in the city and confront the rebels. I need you to find them and go to the Roadrear cavalry camp. Then, meet with Roer and explain our situation to him." Philip's expression was solemn as he nodded his head and said, "What else?" Shea sighed and said, "Firstly, I am afraid that everyone is under the impression that the northern part of the Empire has fallen. You need to let them know that we are still defending the north. Secondly, I need you to help me ask the Crown Prince for a commission." Philip's face fell. Shea shook his head and said, "In times of trouble, the Crown Prince can replace the Emperor to exercise his authority. We have too many people under our command now. The 6th Corps and the other local garrison troops. I am only a prefectural armaments captain and my military position is only at the emblem regimental level. Without a title and identity, how can I command them? Although that Crown Prince Garcia hates me to death, the bigger picture is more important. Roer is also on the side and that fatso will also help you. In any case, this commission must be obtained. Otherwise, even if we bring the 6th Corps, we won't be able to command this nest of rabbits. Pausing, he said in a low voice, if you can't get the commission, you can settle for the next best thing. Let Roar write a letter personally. Roar is the old superior of the 6th Corps. Most of the people in the 6th Corps were trained by him. With a letter personally written by him, we should be able to suppress these fellows. As for the content of the letter, you and Roar will explain our situation here clearly. This fatso is smarter than anyone else. He will know how to write it. After saying all this, Shea took a deep breath and stared at Philip. You will have to pass through heavily enemy territory alone. It will be a journey of thousands of miles, and you may encounter all kinds of dangers along the way. If you have any other ideas, I won't blame you. Today, I will tell you one thing. Philip, there is no need to talk about the grudges between us. If you succeed in this task, I, Shea Thunder, will treat you as a brother from now on. Philip's eyes flickered and he said nothing. After giving Shea a glance, he suddenly pulled out the short knife from his waist and slammed it heavily onto the table. Then, with his head held high, he turned around and walked out. After Philip left, Shea stood there, looking at the short knife on the table, lost in thought. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. When he and Philip first met, they were enemies and not friends. Later, he crippled his hand but also saved his life. Speaking of gratitude and enmity, it was really difficult to clearly distinguish between them. After a while, Dora's voice rang out in his mind, Hey kid, do you really think that Osjilla can hold on? Shea smiled and replied, To be honest, I don't think he can hold on either. Dora was puzzled and asked, Then why are you so confident? I don't have confidence in the royal family. I have confidence in that old guy. Let's not talk about whether that guy is dead or alive. Even if he is dead, he won't leave no room for maneuver. This kind of person, generally speaking, is frightening when alive, but even more frightening when dead. Shea chuckled and said, When I first saw Cavashir, I recognized him as this kind of person. Which kind? The kind of madman who, even in death, will drag the enemy down with him. Shea's expression was cold and indifferent. 3 days later, Green really did come with the 6th Corps. The entire 6th Corps from top to bottom looked to be in a sorry state. However, Shea did not dare to underestimate these people in the slightest. The reason was simple. If it were him, he could not guarantee that he would be able to do the same thing. Escape unscathed from the encirclement and interception of Hastings' Black Flag Army. The 6th Corps was also garrisoned in the city. With the arrival of the 6th Corps, the first and most obvious change was that the arrogant horse gang in the city immediately became a lot more honest in their attitude. Although the horse gang had already made their attitude clear, there were still a lot of people among these horse gang who were somewhat unconvinced. The original garrison in the city was too small. There were only a few hundred miscellaneous soldiers. Many of the horse gang felt that it was too useless for them to be taken in by such an imperial army. There were even some horse gang who felt that with just a few hundred miscellaneous soldiers, it would be better for us to take them in than for them to take us in. The guests were strong while the main force was weak. It was inevitable that these proud horse gang would have other thoughts in their minds. Now that there were more than 8,000 officers and men of the 6th Corps garrisoned in the city, the horse gang's thoughts finally settled down. Although the 6th Corps was also a guest in a strict sense, it was still an imperial army after all. It's the weekend again. Brothers, watching the World Cup must have been very tiring recently. The weekend is just the right time to take a breather and watch the game more happily. Looking for a recommendation vote today. This book is very popular. Everyone, please help me boost my popularity. Many thanks, many thanks. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.